Yes.
Bruce Johnson, I'm here.
No, it's not. That window.
All right, everybody, it's good to have everyone here. If calendar is correct, it is December 9th, 2025, and we're beginning this afternoon with a joint meeting of the mayor and commission of Athens-Clarke County, the city of Winterville, and the city of Bogart. So very excited to have everybody here. We don't get to do this that often, but given state law and given the prospect of the next round of TSPLOST, this is the path that's been drawn for us. So really glad to have everybody here. I do want to go around and just have everybody introduce themselves, just so everybody knows who everybody else at the table is, since we don't see each other all that often. So I'll start on my far right and we'll just go around the horseshoe.
Right, I'm Athens-Clarke County District 8 Commissioner. That's over on the east side of the public.
Janet Jones, mayor of Bogart.
I'm Grace Martin. I'm the clerk for the city of Bogart.
Bruce Johnson, Winterville City Council.
Heidi Spratland, Winterville City Council.
Wendy Bond, Municipal Clerk, in the City of Winterville.
Stephanie Johnson, Commissioner, District 6 is Savannah Highway. Very nice to meet you.
Good afternoon. I'm Josh Hawkins. I'm the Capital Projects Director, so staff for Athens-Clarke County.
Kelly Girtz, mayor of ACC.
Allison Wright, I'm a County Commissioner with Athens.
Dexter Fisher, Commissioner, District 5, Mayor Pro Tem.
Ovita Farman, District 9, North, and Madison, Jackson.
Tiffany Taylor, District 3, that's Winterville as well as East Athens.
All right, very sweet. Well, I appreciate everybody being here. We're going to begin with a presentation from our Capital Projects Director, Josh Hawkins, who's going to talk to us a little bit about some considerations for the next round of TSPLOST. And then after that presentation, we'll have some discussion about that. Josh?
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome again to the friends from Winterville and Bogart. There are a few more final steps to take before we get to our referendum in May of 2026. It's coming up May, and there are some open questions remaining. We're not trying to tackle all those open questions today, but perhaps we take one of them, discuss them today, and that will help us with some of the future open questions. I've got a few slides. There's not many, but I'll just roll through them with some commentary and a little bit of context, and kind of go back. We can go back as necessary in the conversation after that. One reminder that the referendum coming up in May is a renewal of an existing sales tax. So we had the first TSPLOST was TSPLOST 2018. That referendum was in November of 2017. The next referendum was in May of 2022. And here we are having the next referendum with the same TSPLOST here in May 2026. One of the things that you might notice if you've been through this process before is that some things are different about this time. And if it feels different, it's because the legislature changed some of the rules for us and things are actually different. And we'll point out a couple of those things here in this presentation. One of the things that the state requires, though, is that we do this meeting. That we invite all the municipalities to get together and we just discuss. That's one of the requirements. It's kind of nice to get together every once in a while. It gives us a reason to talk to one another. There is no required outcome of this, just that we get together and talk about potential projects. Although we will kind of pose a question to the group and hopefully get some consensus around that question. As a result, ultimately, one of the three components in order to get a question on the ballot is an intergovernmental agreement between Athens-Clarke County, Winterville, and Bogart. And that's kind of what we're working toward with this meeting here. The next note there is that there is a minimum distribution formula. So in all the sales taxes that are collected by the Department of Revenue, those ultimately will not only go to Athens-Clarke County as a unified government, but also to the city of Winterville and to the city of Bogart. In previous times, that's been a sort of question of how much. At this point, the legislature has kind of given us a formula to use that captures population and road mile. And so now that's a decision we don't have to make, at least as a minimum distribution to the cities. That's given to us, and we'll see what the results of that is here in this presentation. There is, however, a new decision for us to make collectively, and that is whether or not we would stick with a 5-year term. So TSPLOST 2026 by itself would be a 5-year term of collections. We have the option collectively to decide we'd like to extend that for a 6th year. And that's one of the things that we'll talk about here in this presentation. And then I will go over what the next steps are after today's meeting. So I like to show this. Hopefully you've got something in front of you that shows a little more clearly than that for the commissioners. This is hopefully something that you've seen before and something that I will continue to use. What this is representing on the left side there is 2018 when we started collecting TSPLOST, and on the right side there is today. And each of those points on that chart is monthly collections. So the amount of sales tax dollars that are collected and remitted to Athens-Clarke County. Athens-Clarke County. And what you kind of see there is a rhythm. There's a kind of rhythm there. You can see when holiday seasons are. You can see when football season is, when summer is. So there are some things about this that's predictable. And then there are other things about collections that are less predictable. And you can see there, if you're following the green line, it's relatively flat there early. And then the trend sort of increases there in the COVID era. I call it the COVID era. But lately, over the past 18 months or so, it's kind of flattened out a little bit more. And I just think that's important for you all to know that trend, just generally speaking, and that's the sort of thing that is harder for us to predict what that might look like over the next few years. But it's something that's important for us to try to do here. So, but the last referendum was in May of 2022. Election started in October of 2022, and as has been indicated by the Department of Revenue, that the collections on TSPLOST 2023 will end September of 2027. So we have planned out our process so that there's no gap in collections after that date. So we planned the next referendum for this coming May for collections to start in October of 2027, and assuming date you see up there for this next referendum is September of 2033. That's assuming we do select 6-year term instead of the 5-year term, which is something that we will ask. All right, we talked about the minimum distribution to municipalities. So in previous years, it's been somewhat of a negotiation about how much to distribute between Athens-Clarke County, Winterville, and Bogart. Now that we have a formula that's kind of given to us in statute, that result on the right side is the result of that formula there. If you care to see the arithmetic behind it, then we have that available too. I just wanted to show you the results here in real dollars. What does that mean? I think I'll add, if you did a percent there, the Winterville's percent effectively would be 2.13% of the total program, and Bogart's would be 0.25% of the total program. So this is a minimum distribution based on a 5-year term. That small print there says this assumes a 5-year term right there. And those other 2 columns are the previous TSPLOST and what those distributions look like. So there is a significant difference here in distributions to Winterville and Bogart.
We're gonna wait till the end. Yeah.
All right. So this brings up the question of, and once I get through the slides, we'll come back to this idea of the 6th year and whether or not collectively that is something we desire to pursue. And if it is, we would then kind of talk about presumably how we'd like to use the additional revenue that would come in that 6th year. This chart shows, top of that chart is the first 5 years and the projections in each one of those years and the dates, month from and to. And what it shows is in year 6, effectively, you would have $42 million in collections in that 6th year. At the moment, we've been planning for a 5-year period with a $197 million program. That's the projection. So if we choose a 6th year, now we're talking about a $239 million program instead of $197 million. And now, at least from Athens-Clarke County's perspective, we have been planning and trying to allocate that 5 years worth of collections and not the 6th year. So that's one of the open questions that we have to sort out over the next month or so before February 3rd vote. The 6th year is one that is kind of, it's designed for us to collectively decide, yes, we want it, and how should we appropriate sort of that collections that we would get in. The other notes that I have up here is one consideration for appropriating that money is that this distribution to Winterville and Bogart, the minimum distribution of Winterville and Bogart is kind of required. So you would need to do that in the 6th year as well. And then I was somewhat, that next note there says 19.9 million to continue the payment management program and transit services. I might have been a little bit presumptive there, just assuming that of the projects that we pre-designated, those are 2 that I wanted to highlight as ones that we might have a hard time covering down on with the general fund or otherwise if we did not fund those 2 programs, get TSPLOST in this year. I wanted to at least highlight that for you and offer that to you. That's basically a continuation of what you illustrated in the pre-designated projects. Next note there, I did want to point out that Winterville submitted 5 applications for the advisory committee to review to be a part of, what became the candidate projects that the advisory committee recommended to the mayor and commission. None of those 5 made the candidate project list. Remember, that was the advisory committee was whittling down from 600 million down to less than 60 million. And Winterville, the projects that were submitted by the city of Winterville did not make that list in the end. But I did want to point them out here, and perhaps there's something that I would like to discuss. So first 5 years, at the top of that chart, year 6, if we decide to pursue it, would be 42 million projected collections, and then some considerations for how to allocate the $42 million from year 6. After today, each governing authority would need to approve their own project list to be included in the resolution to put the question on the ballot, right? So, and I've handed out to Winterville and Bogart what you did last time. Perhaps you want to do something similar or something different, but that's for you to take back to your city councils and develop, and then we can insert that into the intergovernmental agreement resolution after you all decide as a city council. February 3rd, as we have illustrated, is kind of the last day for the mayor and commission to vote, put this question on the ballot, to have a project list, to have a budget. So we're on that trajectory. It is in your next cycle, your January cycle, but February 3rd will be the last day for us to do that in order to get it to the Board of Elections in time for them to put that question on the ballot. May referendum, and then post-referendum, there are also some questions that we would need to answer: plan program implementation, budgeting, tiering over a period of time, and then whether or not to issue bonds. Those are questions to answer post-referendum, October 2027. That's when we're. All right, I'm going to stop talking right there. I'm sure there are some questions. Put it back over, and the principal question that we're looking for is 5-year term. We can stop there, or if we collectively decide to, a 6th year.
All right, thanks, Josh. I appreciate that. So that's kind of the main question in front of us is kind of the 5-year versus the 6-year. Staff, of course, has suggested that there were some operational things included in the normal first 5 years that we would be kind of thoughtful wise to consider for a 6th year. And then obviously there's the formulaic allocation, and then of course the question of, whether some of those submitted projects by Winterville, might make kind of a 60-year model. Go ahead and take questions now. I've got Commissioner Thornton.
And I guess you alluded to that, and I guess that's why I struggle with the process of, the advisory groups, because to me, that should have been a no-brainer that Winterville should have made that cutoff list. But we, commission, we have the ability to make adjustments to the recommendations for in the future. So I wanted to
No, that's exactly right. So Josh highlighted that February vote of the county commission. And it would be by that point where the commission, as they've sometimes done in the past, might modify the recommended list of projects to produce a final list of projects that would be on the referendum in front of the public, in front of the vote.
So so I'm assuming then, whatever Winterville submitted, that we would have copies of that prior to our discussion?
Absolutely. And I think you've got sort of a master list, but maybe Josh, it's an opportunity to send out to everybody kind of a description of those projects. And if we've got some associated project materials, the presentation materials, that way everybody could see this. So Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify this to make sure it's clear to myself and to everyone. If I go back to slide 4, the minimum distribution to municipalities, that shows that in this 5-year program, we'll get 4.1. Other projects were possibly for that. So just because they weren't on there, there's still over $4 million in there right now for Winterville and 483,000 for Bogart.
That's right, because generally, as allowable by state law, municipalities can decide what they want to spend those dollars on that they receive.
So the Winterville they might have other plans, but they could use it for one of those projects as well.
Yeah. Mr. Link?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to keep in mind that the federal government has canceled any hope for, federal money towards projects that prioritize, bike and pedestrian safety. They're focusing purely on projects that prioritize automobiles. But I think, as we move forward with considering that list, we probably need to consider projects in the past that have relied on some federal money for completion. Could we possibly get a list from staff of those kind of transportation projects that relied on federal money that are not specifically automobile focused? So we have an idea of what might have hope for getting allocations from the federal government versus what.
So kind of as you think of the project, say in 2 buckets, a bucket that might be eligible for federal funds and a bucket that may not, is that what you're?
Yeah. I mean, there's just projects that we're going to have absolutely no hope for getting outside funds for the current federal priority.
And it might be helpful for everybody to know too, oftentimes GDOT provides some funds and their program guidelines may be different than those of the federal government. We, for example, recently received notice of the kind of multi-use path along Highway 78 from approximately the coming roundabout at Hancock to Epps-Creek. Those were state dollars. Let's see, I've got Commissioner Johnson and Commissioner Wright.
So this is, we're just asking questions about the 4 or 5 year options. I have other questions. So is it just
Five or six.
I'm sorry, thank you, the 5 or 6 year.
Initially,
Okay.
yeah, initially that's, we're definitely interested in that, but if you've got a couple other questions about the project parameters broadly.
Okay, I would, thank you so much. I would start with the 5 or 6 year option. I wrote out my answer so I can just be succinct. So I would support a 5-year option because the 5-year plan, it forces us as a government to deliver projects to completion. And I've shared with you, it's no secret, there are residents in District 6 that are not fully sold on approving, wanting me to approve. TSPLOST 2026 because of projects not being completed with a reasonable schedule. 5-year option would allow voters to see delivery, project delivery. It would allow us to make the schedule a priority and stick to it. If the projects stall, they shift, and voters get locked in with the longer option plan, like a 6-year plan. And things like population growth, safety issues, they emerge, climate, technology, and transit. Those needs fall. The 5-year plan option allows us flexibility and allows us as a community to course correct quicker to those emerging changes. So that's my response to the 5 or 6-year option. So I have 2 or 3 questions. So I was curious if, I don't know the answer, so it's a real question. Is there anyone from the Winterville or Bogart area serving on the TSPLOST?
Yes.
And can you provide more context to why these projects were not accepted?
Often the advisory committee didn't share with us, what they were thinking. The process just allows them to kind of select. I might not be able to provide a whole lot of insight into why.
Okay, so earlier you mentioned the 2.13% and I think 0.25 for Bogart for the breakdown on revenue allocation from the Department of Revenue. Is it based on population or is it based on land? What is it based on?
It's a formula, and so the 2 primary variables in the formula are population in the census.
Okay.
And then road miles as reported to GDOT. And then there's, they're weighted and, I can share with you the full formula, but those are the 2 inputs that would that leads us to this arithmetic right here.
I think this is my last one. On this page that looks at the collections history of revenue from the beginning of the program, there's a significant dip in May 2020 and also May 25. That just because graduation? Or do you have a reason that you think is the reason for that gigantic dip?
Yep. So, there's a certain level of data that's available to us on sales tax collections. Really, what we have to go on is the dollar figure that gets deposited in the bank account by the Department of Revenue. Anything beyond that, we're left to kind of make reasonable guesses about. But when I look at I'll share this. When I look at the rhythm, I do see a dip there after the holidays, or in Q1 of every year. That's the lowest quarter of every year. Something about that time period that retail sales drops. The opposite in the Q4, right? You typically, it's holiday season, you've got home games, a lot going on then, and you can see if there was 3 home games, you're gonna see that. You see it.
That's all my questions right for now.
Sorry.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, I appreciate the additional detail on having our comrades from the other communities here. I am all in favor of the 6 plan because of how long the whole process takes. We can continue to collect. Are you confirming that we would keep those same percentages for the 6 year? I didn't see if we did 6 years, they would get. No. Because that would be a nice.
Year 6 considerations, that first line there says $1 million to continue the minimum distribution to Winterville and Bogart. And yes, we should consider that a requirement to.
In there. Okay, so that's the same percentage and then
in dollars, that would be the portion of the 42 million. That would be, I think it ends up being 900,000 for Winterville and close to 100,000 for Bogart in addition to.
Okay. Okay.
That's
all right. Well, that's good. And then, Kelly, you were saying that moving forward, we weren't going to send anything back to the committee. We need to just get our decisions made.
Yeah, I mean, this really is a decision for the legislative body.
So, the information that Commissioner Link asked for is taking you saying if we have if we call them the candidate projects, and you want to have a column that says possible federal funding, which maybe is not available anymore?
Yeah, I mean,
Would never have been.
Yeah, or at least the column that would indicate this would not be available for federal funds under.
Because I thought that since these were all local projects, I thought they were all supposed to be.
We
Our
are
funding.
funding federal funds for, say, the Firefly Trail. You know, occasionally there's federal funds that supplement some of our, greenway and trail projects, but those aren't gonna happen anymore.
Right, and those aren't any of our candidate projects right now.
Yeah, but.
So you're saying though, you're saying you want to see that mark or that column on the
Yeah.
projects that didn't make it to the candidate.
Yeah, I
level.
mean, any project that's gonna have a significant focus on bike and pedestrian safety is not gonna be eligible for federal funds.
Right. And the point being that those didn't make it out of the committee for our consideration anyway. So I guess I'm wondering with the short timeline that we have, how far back we want to go in the decisions from what the committee did as a group. I don't know how long it's going to take to do that and how, I don't know that everybody in the group is wanting to go backwards in the process.
I mean, we just need to keep that in mind when we do come up with.
Well, I agree. I agree. We need to keep that in mind, but process wise, to be able to meet our deadline. I guess, are we going to get information from staff as well as the feedback from the other communities? What to do?
I'll do my best.
Okay.
One thing I did want to point out though, just as a reminder, the years that we're talking about of collections here is effectively 2028 to 2033. 2028 to 2033. Those are the years of collections that we're talking about here. So when we talk about the expectation of external funding, it's so hard to predict what might be available to us, in those years. It's hard to say right now what's available to us right now.
Right.
So, looking at that time period, trying to assume what external, and sometimes, but to your point, sometimes the local dollars are supplementing federal dollars, or they're matched to an extra. Sometimes it's the other way around, that we're using that's primarily local dollars, and we're just looking for a little extra. So both of those can exist. And historically, we've just, in the moment, what's available to us right now, we do the best we can with first of all, searching and applying for what might be appropriate for each project, and then get us to that end state. Many times, as we're looking at this in projects, though, we kind of make the assumption that we're going to do the best we can with what we have locally, and if something else is available to us, then we accept.
Yeah, and then I guess I wanted to say, since we're comfortable and used to talking freely in this room, and want to make sure we hear from our visitors.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, I've got Commissioner Fisher on tap. Wanted to make sure we kind of attend to anybody who hasn't had a chance to get session time yet. And then we'll turn it over. Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on Commissioner Wright's comments about the process, and that it will be coming back to us as a commission to sort of some of those projects that didn't make the list can come back on that list to a point. So I think the timing is important for when we get that back, so we can maybe make some of those type of decisions moving forward. Because again, looking at the list that the TSPLOST committee brought to us with East Side focus, which I think did yeoman's work, and I appreciate the job that the committee did, but I think we just need to look overall. And one thing I have suggested, it seems like each district, all these TSPLOST projects should get something, regardless, what it may be from a dollar amount, but each district should get money. Maybe not so much one particular district get off focus. So that's why I think it's critical that when we go back, start looking at that list again, that we can spread the wealth out a little bit among the districts will be helpful.
And just before I get to those who haven't spoken yet, just process wise, it's incumbent on the commission that if they would seek some different list ultimately to be on the ballot, but that needs to be well coordinated ahead of that first Tuesday of February. Like what we don't want is that Monday night horse trading happening. We want the horses to be traded well in advance of the meeting. So everybody knows which ones are galloping where. Judd.
I would just say ideally, we really need probably to approve the final list by the agenda setting meeting before the February meeting, because the intergovernmental agreement, the resolutions will need to be in final form to be approved.
There we go. So January 20th.
So we know, because also we have to get in the final form so the IGA can be approved by the respective mayor and councils of Winterville and Bogart. So
Judd has backed up our timeline to January 20th.
yeah, well, I mean, you know, if it
Which is
was like
fair.
a week, we could gray it, you know, but you sometimes we got a document that's unified because everybody has to approve it. So just kind of thinking about that, that would be ideal.
Yeah.
Say, I'm talking ideally.
And we like our staff people to sleep once in a while. Folks who haven't spoken, folks from Bogart and Winterville, any observations?
Yeah, I have a comment. Mind going back to the slide that shows the TSPLOST projects that were submitted but not approved. I just want to make a comment as you guys are considering whether or not to include some of the one or more of the Winterville projects on the TSPLOST. We actually, not all of these, but many of these, especially all the sidewalks, we put together like $25 million worth of projects. And actually submitted grants to GDOT to try to get those projects. And we did that with the understanding that as part of those grants, that there were going to be federal matching funds for cities under a population of 5,000. That was going to give us a chance to get those. Further discussions with GDOT revealed that because we are part of McCourt's, that regional transportation study, unfortunately, we're not eligible to get those federal funds for cities under 5,000. So what that means is we had to withdraw those grant applications, because if you think about it, we had, and maybe not all of them are on here that we put the grants on, but it was around $25 million. So you're talking just the 20% matching funds were $5 million. Well, as you see, we only had a total of 1.4 million from this current SPLOST. So with the timeline, we couldn't do it. So it's kind of a shame that we went under the impression that we're going to get some federal help. We couldn't because we're bundled in with Athens in the McCourt's transportation study. So we had to withdraw all of those grants. And so just wanted to you guys keep that in mind, that some of these are just so costly that even with our current TSPLOST allocation, we can't even afford the matching funds. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Mayor Jones?
I would support the 6-year. That sounds better. That gives us an extra 100,000. Even though we're a tiny little town and don't have that much of Clarke County in our town, we do have it. And I would support the 6-year.
And follow on with some of the folks, Commissioner Taylor?
Yeah, most of the TSPLOST projects that were approved are in District 3. First of all, praise God for that, because we've been left behind, but also because Winterville is also a part of District 3, then I would be willing to look back at the list to see some things that maybe East Athens could do without for a while, to include some of the improvements for Winterville, if that's like an option.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Okay, Commissioner Thornton and Commissioner Link?
I definitely support the 6-year plan for all the reasons that were said and given. But I do want to respond to Commissioner Johnson's question about the process. I didn't know Winterville had folk around the table, so that was good to know that they did have folk around. But from my representative, some people didn't show up sometimes for those crucial discussions and votes. And also their ranking system was very difficult from my representative. So you could have a good plan, but if those votes weren't there, or if you didn't have any strong advocacy around the table, that's why some of those might have not made the list. And the next thing I wanted to see, I've heard Commissioner Fisher talk about this, about some of these projects. So is there a possibility when money starts rolling in that we can get some bonds and repay the bonds through the TSPLOST monies that come in and keep projects moving so they don't get on the back burner
Bonds.
or whatever it is?
Certainly are a component, typically a component of SPLOST or TSPLOST. There are really two questions to answer on bonds. Number one is the question that's on the ballot has to specifically talk about authorize us to issue bonds. And so do we include that in the question or not that goes on the ballot? That's the question that we have right now. And then the second question to answer on bonds is after the referendum, do we actually exercise those bonds? And there are a certain set of conditions that I would look for in advising you all on whether or not we exercise and issue those bonds for projects that are ready for money. And you've got to get those projects ready for money. It takes it kind of ramps up, right, in terms of the spending and where projects are in the full development process. And so you would look for ones that are almost shovel ready, ones where there are big bills coming in quickly. Those would be the sort of projects that would be ripe and benefit from issuing bonds and getting things moving before the revenue comes in. But I did want to point out there are kind of two different decisions to make on bonds. One is we can make before February to say what the question looks like on the ballot that would give us the ability, the flexibility, if we did have a project like that in the future to issue bonds. And then after the referendum, once we start looking at those projects, maybe there are some that would benefit from getting some cash before it's collected and then we pay it back. So I think that's how did that all that make sense?
Yeah, that's very helpful. And because you said right off the top of your head, as we delve into this process, the staff just give us what you said in writing. That's all I'm asking.
And just to remind everybody, an exercise that always happens after the referendum is passed is the tiering discussion of which projects are going to happen in approximately roughly which years. And of course, the ability to bond or borrow some money up front will impact that because that could say, hey, we can do these, and to use Josh's phraseology, shovel-ready projects right now if we can borrow some of this money. Commissioner Johnson.
When did you say the tiering system starts?
Yeah, we do that at a work session after the referendum, after the public goes to the ballot.
I think we discussed at our retreat that we don't like that because it's not clear. It's not clear to residents. It's not clear to us. We have a referendum that was approved November 2019. Some projects haven't even been touched. It's unexplainable. There's no communication to us why. There's no communication to us when. So I thought that we overarchingly stated at the retreat that we don't like making those decisions after the referendum. And also the budgeting, I think you and I have had conversations and I've had conversations with other folks about the underestimations that we continually get for these projects, then for them all to come back to us and say, they don't have enough money. Whoever is providing the estimation, I do understand material costs increasing, but whoever is making the recommendations for the budgets up things, it should go without saying that they build in an inflation percentage increase. That's just 101 for providing those budget suggestions. And we are always over budget. And there's a way to do it better. That's my comment.
Commissioner Myers, I've heard from you.
I think we did talk about the tiering. I think one of the things I don't know if this has been addressed yet, was that we aren't really good at publicizing and educating the public and even ourselves about that tiering. So in terms of basically just making a link to the tiering schedule and having that right up front. So it's very hard to figure things out. I would say on the cost of estimates, and I don't really know if this is, I don't know how historically, I don't know how accurate it is, but having been on the chair, the oversight committee for like, I don't know, it was like 8 years from 2005 to 2011 and such. There weren't these cost overrides to the extent that we have them now. And I think that a lot of, I mean, from my time on the here in the last 5 years has been the same time that housing costs, construction costs has skyrocketed. So I think that although there's always been a need to have that cushion with, I think there's a 30% contingency. Isn't that built into it, Andrew, or 30 into the construction? And that has been effective, somewhat effective in the past, but it's not been effective in this time period where we've had such escalating costs. And so I think that addresses some of the problems, maybe some of the frustrations as well, because it's really hard when you see those project costs double.
Dexter, then Melissa.
Just one more comment. Having done SPLOST projects, with the school district, and I think to Commissioner Johnson's, point she made, if we're gonna do these projects, we go ahead and price them out if we're gonna bond and borrow the money.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead and price them up front and then go ahead and pay for it because we know what the price is. Problem that we got is we do the project, we wait to collect the taxes, and then inflation and everything else goes up. So y'all have already heard me always say this. To me, that's not the way we should do SPLOST projects. That's why the voters so have hold us accountable when they don't see things coming out the ground. So for me, I'm just a big advocate is if we got a project that's ready, we look at it, we price it out, go ahead to Josh's point, go ahead and start building, then as the tax collection come in, we pay for it. That way, yeah, there may still be some inflation costs, like I said, maybe a 30% contention, you got that in there. But if you're waiting 4 or 5 years to do projects, to me, that just never made sense to me. That's why our cost escalates. And if you get into a recession, anything with materials cost, it goes up. So that's why we're having some struggles with getting projects out the ground. So my recommendation is always gonna be, for me, is borrow the money, is bond it, however we word it when we go through this process. Get the money, we price it out, you design it, build it, got a cost, and you go forward.
Just to follow up on that, that was kind of really, really short just there, because we brought this up and I have this thing in my memory and I just need to correct it if it's not true. I just remember in the past with the SPLOST programs and such, there was a limit to how much we could bond out. I don't know if that was self-imposed, like you couldn't, like, I just remember those discussions where we can do this much and that's why we used it on the arena. I just don't know. And maybe we don't have the answer now, but in the future, because that's come up quite a bit. And I just don't know if we can bond out the whole thing, or can we only bond at 50% or whatever.
Well, I'll offer a response here and then perhaps I need to check myself afterwards, but that's one of the numbers that needs to be, if we're asking the voters to authorize general obligation bonds associated with SPLOST, we need to ask for that permission in the ballot question. And one of the things we have to put in there is the number, the maximum amount that we would be authorized to issue GO bonds for in the ballot question, and that's our limit. Now, how we come up with what that is, I'd have to consult with, some finance staff and other folks. I think there are some places that put in there the full program, but that's what limits you typically.
Of what we put
is what we decide
Right.
locally to put that number in the ballot question.
And please give us pros and cons when we get that. I'm sure there are pros and cons of both sides to how much, whether it's full 50%. So we can make that decision.
I think it's fair to ask for a staff recommendation on what that ought to be for this program.
And before I return to Melissa, I do want to note that there's some kind of legislative responsibility to the last several packages have often involved late hour emergence of additional projects with no additional dollars. And so if you're trying to wedge more Christmas gifts in the bag you're carrying, that bag is going to get stretched thin. And that means that sometimes the individual project dollar amounts struggle to meet the actual brick and mortar needs of the project. And so we can have an impact on that.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up the same thing. You know, a lot of times this hearing has everything to do with the fact that we don't allocate enough money to complete a project because we end up stretching the funding to see that everybody gets a little bit. But in the end, it ends up more projects end up losing out because they don't. And again, I want us to consider alternative funding sources. Often these TSPLOST dollars are leveraged for attracting other funds. You see that happen with College Square, the ADDA jumped into this project, and we see that often happening with federal dollars coming in. We now also have TAG money. So I would, and I've brought this up before in these work sessions, I think it would be really helpful for us as we move forward and considering projects that were worthy projects that were left off the list and how to get money for them, looking at the projects that were selected and considering what alternative funding sources are out there and how we might be able to get those projects that don't have any alternative funding sources on that list. Because yeah, we are facing a dearth of federal funds, but we do have TAD money coming in, and some of these TADs are bringing in more money than others. So when you consider that, I really feel like we need a list that kind of checks off alternative funding sources on that list so we can make that final decision.
I think Josh has a couple of notes and then I'll return to Commissioner
I
Wright.
would highlight in your upcoming agenda cycle, just pay attention to the facts and issues on the agenda reports that we.
Great, thank you, Josh.
Okay, that's good, because I was back to your column about federal money, that it seems like there could be a column too for the projects that we're wanting to nail down that say TAD, no TAD.
Yeah, and the tiering.
That same thing, but you've already said it's.
Yeah, I mean, the tiering often has, and the delay on project completion often has a lot to do with the fact that we're out there seeking alternative funds to.
Same with the tiering.
Commissioner Thornton, and then I want to return to kind of our core question.
I already answered the core question, right? 6. So, when dollars come in, whether they're slow or whatever, do they also accumulate, interest?
Ma'am.
So do we have that in separate somewhere? Or how, I guess what I'm asking, an interest be used to supplement where we might be falling short at?
Yes, ma'am.
And if you could spell that out and when you give us reports, that would be helpful for me. So I do think the interest, my next question, I hope when do we decide, or are we going to decide on the staffing for TSPLOST? I asked Mr. Bob at the one of those meetings if we could get a dollar amount on what we're paying Jacobson and all of the areas that Jacobson is overseeing. So would we, I don't know when that happens, that bid or make that decision on whether we want to go in-house or continue.
It'll be kind of an evolution. So if you may remember, we talked a little bit about it where I think as we build that capacity internally, so we'll need dollars dedicated to that, to grow that staff, we will slowly kind of wean ourselves off, if you will, project management coming from consultants. So it won't happen all at once. It won't happen abruptly. It'll be kind of a time of building up resources and taking off resources with that. That will be combined with the revised process that we've shared with you all that we'll be finalizing in January. Most likely is when all of that's going to get done. So you should see in January, new process, starting to answer the question that you've asked. And then certainly with the proposed budget coming forward, you'll start to see items in there related to implementing that.
And we still would be able to get the the monies we've already paid to take.
Yes, I actually already have that from Josh. I need to actually put it in the structure that makes sense to everyone. So yes, you'll have that as well.
Yeah, another note about interest, and then we'll go ahead and return to the 6-year question.
I just wanted to point out one thing about interest for the group, since you brought up interest and that, you know, there are perhaps some benefits to earning that over time. If we decide to issue bonds, the money that the proceeds that result are less able to earn interest. That money is less able to earn interest. So if we end up in a situation where we issue bonds and we're not ready to spend that money is it's not zero, but it's less able to earn interest than this SPLOST coming in and being held in.
And I think that would go back to Commissioner Meyer's question about the pros and the cons. That would definitely be a con if we looked at interest as a resource.
It may not necessarily be a con if we're not paying inflation. You know? Yes, I'll say it. Because we don't know what the inflation is going to be.
All right, so we've heard from several folks about the kind of 5 or 6 year option. Anybody who's sort of not made a determination about that, kind of ready to provide some perspective, Bruce?
Had to come out, Mayor Phil wasn't able to make it, he's out of town, but I have had some conversations with him. And I mean, I can't speak for all of council, but I know he is tentatively in favor of a 6 year. I am as well, but it's what would make that much more appealing to us if we could get a little help with some of these projects we can't afford, particularly the intersection improvements, which are some roundabouts on our in the center of town. That's probably the highest priority. But so I would say we're tentatively, in favor of the 6 year, but we could make it much more appealing if we get a little help with some of these projects we just simply can't afford with our entire allocation.
No, and that reflects what Mayor Farrell and I spoke about last week. So it makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Else want to throw out a thought? Certainly something you can continue to kind of rest with and think about. All right, Mr. Thorne.
Mayor, if Winterville is tentatively there based on what the gentleman said, does that tighten our decision time? I mean,
We're still on the same calendar. So if that's the question, we're still needing a vote by February 3rd. Certainly, it sounds like, I think it's very clear, the tentative is based on the inclusion of an additional Winterville Center project. So I think that's clear. I think staff could give us sort of what an outline of year 6 would look like based on those areas of capital need that we just have year in, year out, like paving, and the natural formulaic allocation to the municipalities, as well as what the sort of roundabout would take, and then how many dollars would be left over. I think it would be easy to say, all right, well, if we know we're going to have, and it's somewhere just $10 million left over at that point. If there is that, and there's also the desire to have some projects kind of more westerly centered in the county, that may be a formula that comes together nicely. Good. All right, anything else? All right, everybody, thank you so much. Folks from Bogart, Winterville, we really appreciate it. I do need a formal motion to adjourn this. So moved.
Second.
All right, got a motion from Commissioner Fisher, second from Commissioner Wright. All in favor?
I
All right, thanks, everybody, and we'll go ahead and move into our next presentation now. Get out in an hour.
Nice to meet you.
See you again.
Because it takes so long.
All their parties at night.
That's all right. We're going to lunch. Thanks anyway. And I want to talk about that other.
Yes, absolutely. That's a number.
Okay. It's not how we do things. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I think we've emailed.
There.
There's the, line.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been involved in it from the
All
beginning.
right, we are going to be ready in about 30 seconds.
So nice.
Sitting there. They have a little cold. Getting worse.
Oh, you have a cold?
I just came on.
Perfect.
We just have one, so hopefully. Was ready to go.
Stay away from you.
Sarah, I think Andrew was going to start with a couple of words.
I asked him to be like.
All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started with the next part of our afternoon, kind of final item on our work session agenda today. And that's the core development project on kind of what's historically been, depending on the time you've been in Athens, History Village, the Graduate, or Hotel Abacus, among others, or Lick Skillet prior to that. Just in terms of kind of order of activity, we're going to take public input first. Andrew Saunders, manager's office, is going to offer a few words. Andy Savoy from Core is going to take us through the bulk of the presentation, and then commission discussion will follow. Public comment will be kind of as per kind of our standard experience, 3-minute opportunity for every member of the public. We've got the podium set up in the corner. The clerk has the clock. You'll see it turn green when you provide your name, place of residence, yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and red when that 3 minutes has concluded. And we'll thank you for your time with us today as we move forward. It may be the case that some of the questions that emerge in public comment, you'll see satisfied in the presentation. And so it may be helpful just to kind of have the presentation right after that. So if any member of the public would like to speak, now is the time when they may do so. You've got to leave this podium.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Theresa Omanovich. I am here representing the Northeast Georgia Black Chamber of Commerce, 196 Alps Road, Athens, Georgia. We're coming to support the project. we are have received favorable awards from the organization, from Course Spaces, that will help benefit our members of the chamber and members of the African-American small business community. The first and foremost being that they're opening up the construction to local minority vendors, in which there will be a workshop tomorrow morning from 10 a.m. to 12 noon at the Foundry. The chamber is also a recipient of a scholarship funding packet that will benefit local youth ages 16 to 24 on their endeavors in pursuing technical or additional education services from local providers that are here in the healthcare industry, as well as some general contractors that may have apprenticeship programs. Northeast Georgia is also in receipt of a lease at the Foundry of 4,500 square feet to help incubate additional minority contractors in the area. We are focused on addressing the economic mobility of small businesses in the area, and everything that CORE has provided the chamber will assist in that. So we appreciate the opportunity to work with Core Spaces, and we hope that you support this endeavor.
Thank you, Ms. Manovich. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Saraya Lattimore, and my address is 240 North Way in Colbert, Georgia. But I was born and raised in Athens. Actually, I was brought up in Bethel Homes. And this project is very near and dear to my heart. What I used to call Central Athens, known as Lake Park, it's molded me to the person that I am today. I was raised by a single parent. And Lake Park was the place I had to go to escape my environment. It taught me, in the step there, molded me as a person. I am, I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. I want the children to have the same opportunity that I had. The experiences of having a place to go, the experience of going on field trips, the experience of having adults there that could be there when my parents wasn't around. I don't want Lake Park to close. And I know they said it's not about Lake Park, but if you cut off parking, you cut off access. And if I didn't have access to Lake Park, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. I own rental property in Athens. I have children. I have grandchildren that live in Athens. I want everyone to have access to the parking, to be able to go to Lake Park, to be able to develop as young people, young adults. I had my first job at Lake Park as a camp counselor. I'm grateful to be here today, and I'm grateful to show the pride in how important the community centers are to the children and young adults in Athens. I'm speaking for people that was afraid to get up here and speak today. I'm speaking for people that wasn't able to come up here and speak today. People that was afraid because of their jobs. People that was afraid because they didn't know what to say. I'm speaking for the voiceless. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Lattimore.
My name is Leslie Senyard. I live at 710 Village Circle. I know there's a lot I don't know. I just am I've studied the pictures and just know what little I do know. And so I want to come to you about that. It's not the core project itself. I understand you own the property and you can move forward. It's part of Lake Park, and I'm looking at the whole Bethel Homes project that began 5 or 6 years ago and wondering why we can't do sewer work and we're having to partner with corporations where are my tax dollars going? So this scares me that we're having to do these partnerships when my taxes should be paying for infrastructure and from the lay parks and for all those things. I'm guessing Bethel Homes, Athens Council on Aging, Downtown Academy, all of those are key users of lay, so it needs to be protected. So I don't know what it means that you're moving a playground or you moving that, but I also have this picture of a huge parking deck that I struggle with towering over this park that we have. I also wonder who's going to use that parking deck that's way down here almost at North Avenue. So those are the challenges that I think we need to be looking at. Why do we need to partner for sewers? Where did my tax money go if it wasn't to infrastructure? And why do we need to be concerned about what this looks like today? And then what does it mean for all these corporate partnerships and these trades and these land swaps going forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Shanice Allen. I reside at 130 Meredith Ridge Road, Athens. I am the president of the Inner East Athens Neighborhood Association. I have concerns about the project and just gonna put it down to three. There are 3 Ps: playgrounds, public parking deck, and parking still needed. The playgrounds, we've heard about the playground going to be moved and the developer is going to preserve one playground, but we look at that and then there is a gate around that playground, not in writing. Okay. The second playground we know is going to be moved. Well, the major playground is going to be moved to Lake Park, and that the developer is giving $275 or somewhere around there dollars towards that. But then we hear in commission meeting that there's still $1 million that's needed to bring that playground up to code. Where's that money going to come from? We haven't heard about that. So I have concerns that if we don't already know where that money is coming from, how do we know that that playground is going to get there? We want that playground there. We want our children to be able to have somewhere to go and play and be free. From Bethel Homes, Downtown Academy, and other places. The public parking deck. I know you talked about the parking deck that's towering over. We thought that there was going to be parking in that parking deck to accommodate handicap or ADA. That's what we were told originally, probably the 3rd time. Now we find out, I had the opportunity to attend the public, it was a public planning session or planning review. Thank you, Buck, for allowing me to sit in that. I was able to learn a lot of valuable information that a lot of people don't know. So the public parking deck is where the public will park. The ADA handicap spaces will be there. And at first they said it was 150 feet. Listening to that planning work session is greater than 500 feet. And if you have someone that has disabilities, they have comorbidities, they're on oxygen, have diabetes or hypertension or congestive heart failure, or have young children, that is an awful long distance to have to walk. And we call that accessible to those in need. It's not, okay? So that is a problem. When I asked about having that parking be used at the parking deck directly across from Lake Park, I was told that that was for student parking and it was gonna be underground. But then I hear yesterday, it is student parking, but it won't be underground. It's gonna be in the middle. So many different things happening with this project. We just wanna know the truth, the real deal, okay? Voting, the voters are gonna have to be moved. Voting will have to be moved to another location. And then you have people that are gonna be confused about where they're gonna vote because you're moving it.
Thank you,
Then
Mr. Allen. I appreciate it.
parking, they're still gonna need 800 parking spaces. Where are these people gonna park?
Hello, hi. My name is Susan Monteverdi. I live here in Athens. And I represent parents for safety and security through Safety Athens. And I'm here to tell you that parents are unhappy with parking in Athens, both with UGA and with the city of Athens. And they prefer one space, one bed. So we did some calling around and we looked at Hub One, which Core, I believe, owns. And they have 460 units and 200 on-site parking spots. That's 42% beds that have parking. I was told that these spots, when they go out for lease, fill up within 1 minute of hitting the market. These cost $185 per space in addition to the excessive rent for luxury apartments. So they're shy of 260 spaces just on Hub 1. Parking at the Rib, they're parking at the Rib in Newberry, which is owned by Core, I believe. Trying to secure more parking downtown on surface lots. This is what Hub 1 told me as a parent. Developer for this Hub 2 has 885 spaces reported for on-site parking for 1,407 beds. Again, that's 42%. That leaves 800 beds without parking. I understand the Core has no priority to the public parking deck that's going to be, operated and owned by the city. So the question is, students are going to have cars. We are a college town, and parents are going to give them their cars to come back and forth and to do the things that they need to do. Where do you think those 800 extra cars of students are going to park? They're going to park at the Linden House. They're going to park on the street. They're going to park wherever they can find a spot, including maybe some of the surface lots that Hub 1 is trying to find to secure more parking because they don't even have enough there, being short 260. So parents want a space per bed. They want that. This is a college town. That is why they prefer the older complexes, which are cheaper, and neighborhoods, which Commissioner Lee brings up all the time, with students living in neighborhoods. They want the parking and they want the price. Students can park close to their apartments. That's important for safety and security for parents. They don't want them in parking decks. They don't even like them in UGA parking decks and then having to take the bus back and walk further. 3 modes of transportation just to get home. Students can park close to their apartments. That's right. This is a big concern for parents, and we got multiple responses that said that's crazy parking. It should be 1 per bed. In fact, they should have extra for guests, and we shouldn't have to be paying $185 for a parking spot in a luxury apartment complex. So that was pretty much all from the parents, but I had one personal question, and that is, does the developer still have to do the 2.5 mil upgrade for the sewer, even if they built by right? I'm just curious. Thank you. Excuse me.
Anyone else today?
That's right.
All right, I'll go ahead and turn it to Andrew Saunders from the manager's office, and then he's going to pass the baton to Andy Savoy.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. So last time this came before the commission, you recall, we started with an intergovernmental agreement with the Downtown Development Authority. Actually had one going back 5+ years for these 2 lots. It was a bit stagnant, and then they brought forward this new proposal. That agreement was approved by the commission. We then spent a significant amount of time working between legal counsel, staff, project designers, developers representatives to build out a development agreement that highlighted everything that was in that IGA and then some. And that came back before the commission, and there was a commission-defined option from Commissioner Fisher to hold it to allow for some more review. And part of that review was this work session today. There was also a community meeting that was held over at Lay Park that builds on some prior ones that had happened before. And so in the development of this work session presentation, I've coordinated with Andy quite closely. We've met multiple times, shared information on slides. So what you see here is a presentation on behalf of both of us. You'll hear from me a bit at the end, and then as we get into Q&A, we'll be able to take a deep dive anywhere you'd like to go. So with that, I'd pass it to Mr. Savoy.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm excited to be able to talk directly to you and actually get some feedback on what's being proposed here. My name is Andy Savoy. I'm with the developer Core Spaces. Behind me in the crowd, I've got Buck Bacon, who's my civil engineer from W&A. He can answer some technical questions probably. And well as David Ellison, who's my land use attorney. And so today, In my presentation, I've got about 5 sections. I'm going to try to blow through them, but I'm also going to try to be exhaustive as to what is actually in this development agreement. So section 1 is kind of like who's core and how did we even get here? Because we've been working on this since last November, so 13 months now. And a lot of that has been slow going, and then all of a sudden we're here. So I just kind of, for the benefit of the public and everybody in this room, want to go through that. Section 2 is what's in the development agreement. What specifically does it say? Section 3 are questions I know you're going to ask, so I'm already going to answer them. And then section 4 is some additional community input that I've gotten as of late and what we're going to do about it. And so with that, I'm going to get going here. So who is CORE? So we are a national developer and owner of housing in university anchored markets. And we own over 50,000 beds. Sometimes we build, sometimes we just buy existing. And so in Athens, we've actually built the hub project at 155 Mitchell. And then the Newberry Apartments in Rive, we bought. And so we own 3 assets in Athens. We are a long-term owner, so we have no plans to sell. In the 7 to 10 year horizon, we do not see selling these properties. We own and operate all of our projects. What's our history with the site? So we actually started looking at this site in May of 2023. At the time, the Graduate Hotel was kind of in the middle of a brand level transaction. They were going to sell their brand and several hotels to another hotel operator. So at the time, top right, you can see what our test fit was going to be for that site. We were going to just build a 950 bed, 100-foot tall student housing building there. And this is us being in Chicago, not knowing too much about the site. When we first look at a project, we see what fits there. What could you build without any help? And so that test fit shows our initial look at this site. Well, it turns out that the Graduate transaction kind of just muddled things up, and that conversation died because they were in the middle of discussions to sell their brand, several of their hotels. So we go away, we focus on 155 Mitchell, and in the interim, they complete their transaction, and a regional firm called Mallory and Evans actually purchases the hotel. That was in June of 2024. They own the hotel right now. And so after they purchase the hotel, they realize, hey, this is a big project. We're going to need to either flip this site to a developer or partner with somebody bigger who can help us take this on. So they hit the road. They talked to several of our competitors as well as us. And in September 2024, we actually signed a purchase agreement with them that says that we will make all major decisions. They do have the right to invest alongside us in kind of a minority position, but final major decisions are made by CORE. And so that's how we got here, and that's kind of where it sits now. Now, as we started this adventure with them, they brought a couple things to our attention. Number one, we're not going to make any friends knocking down the Foundry. That's a beloved building. We didn't know. And number two is there was actually several proposals, not only the North Downtown Athens Master Plan, but also in an IGA from 2020 to actually use the butterfly lot for parking, housing, and artist lofts to activate the Jackson Street Art Walk. And so the idea was perhaps we could propose a swap that achieved a lot of these intentions, saved the Foundry, created parking, and helped to activate that Jackson Street Art Walk. And so that was the major idea. And that's the one we eventually brought forth and had these early discussions with the Downtown Development Authority about. One other piece of context that we learned only after getting into this was that there is a shortage of sewer capacity. That shortage is in the white area that I'm showing on this map. So I've got a couple things shown. I've got the Bethel Homes projects. There's 5 phases. 2 of them, which are in green, can be served by the capacity that's there. The projects in red cannot be served by the capacity that's there. So there's 266 affordable units that are available to be served. And then there's between 425 and 530 affordable units in sites 3, 4, and 5 that can't be served by that sewer capacity. If you look really closely, you'll see a dotted black line that goes like this. It's hard to see, but if you have it up on your screen, you can kind of see it. Everything on the left goes to this red kind of crossing. Everything on the right goes through the blue crossing. The blue crossing, that's a $3.1 million crossing that, to my knowledge, is approved and kind of underway. The red crossing That's a $2.5 million scope of work. And that was going to happen second in line. And so as part of what we're proposing to just do that work. So we control the destiny of the project. We create additional capacity and make those affordable units that are in phases 3, 4, and 5 of Bethel Homes much more possible. And so that became part of what we are proposing. And so I'm actually going to go to the schedule and then I'll go back to this. So November 2024, we reach out to the ADDA. That's our first meeting. We have several follow-up meetings with them, culminating in March, where we actually do a public presentation to the ADDA. And they vote to go ahead and let us go to Mayor and Commission with an IGA. Now I'm going to go back and show you what that IGA says. So the IGA, which was voted on and passed in June, had basically these high-level points. Basically, the ADDA is approved to negotiate an agreement with us wherein we swap land. The butterfly lot, which is in red, gets swapped for a public parking parcel, which is in green. And then our project, which will now basically the red, everything except for the green, becomes the quote unquote core project. That will be just consistent with CD zoning, which is the zoning you would need in order to accomplish the intent shown in the North Downtown Athens master plan. We would build a public parking deck on the public parking parcel. We had initially proposed 200 spaces. The feedback was, hey, we want more. And so we said, we'll build however many you want, but you'll reimburse us for any number of spaces over 200. That landed at 425, but that's not in the IGA, but that's just kind of where it landed in the development agreement. We will pay the in lieu fee for inclusionary zoning. That comes out to around $7.8 million. We will basically the concern about pedestrian ADA compliant access from this parking deck to everywhere else. So up to the intersection of Dougherty North and Thomas, and then into Lay Park itself. We've committed to constructing ADA compliant pedestrian connections to both of those places. We will relocate the Hoyt House to a location approved by ACC. We'll relocate the playground to a location approved by ACC. We'll grant a historic facade easement to save the Foundry building. And we'll grant an artistic mural easement for no less than 1,000 square feet of wall space along Jackson, because that's the planned art walk. So we thought that having an artistic installation there would be good. And then the TAD funds generated by the project will be used east of the Oconee River. So those are the high level points of the IGA that went to a vote in June and passed on June 10th. So now I'm going to go back to this schedule that shows what we've been up to since. So since then, we've been working on the full development agreement, which more thoroughly describes what this is going to look like, what everything in that IGA is going to look like. And it replaces the IGA whenever it gets passed. And so in July, we start drafting that development agreement. We have several public meetings. We have 2 in August. We complete the development agreement in September. We have another public meeting in October. And then it's on the agenda setting meeting in October. And then November, it was tabled to have this discussion where we are right now. And so that, for the benefit of everybody in this room, is what just happened and why we are sitting here. And so now I'm going to move into part 2, which is what does the development agreement say? It's 439 pages. That makes people's eyes glaze over. And so this is the development agreement. The actual agreement itself is only 26 pages. The rest of those pages are exhibits. And staff was, very decisive about wanting to be thorough with this. And so we have 28 pages of drawings. We have the appraisals for both of the parcels that are getting swapped, just there for the benefit of the public. The actual form of the deeds and easements that were going to be granted, those are all previously pre-drafted and put into the agreement. The contracts that we're going to use for the architect and contractor to actually build the public deck, that's a public building. So we just put them in there as exhibits so that the terms of those contracts are just known. And then there are other exhibits describing like the note. There is a reimbursement for a portion of the parking deck. So there are exhibits that kind of describe that, and a few other kind of straggling exhibits like logistics plans, et cetera. So in that 26 pages, there's 8 sections. I'm going to go through articles 2, 3, 4, and part of 5, because that's where the meat of the agreement is. It describes the land swap, the core project that we're going to build, the public parking project that we're going to build, and then offsite work that we're gonna build. And then Articles 6, 7, and 8 have a lot of catch-all and kind of just terms in them that I don't think is gonna be interesting to think about, like basically what kind of insurance do we have to carry? What happens if there's a fire? They're there for you to read, but I'm gonna focus on Articles 2, 3, 4, and 5 because that has most of the substance in it. And so I'm gonna blow through this, but Article 2 describes how exactly is this land swap going to happen? So section 2.1 says that you need to pre-approve a subdivision within 30 days after accepting the development agreement. And that is of the portion of Lake Park that is within the butterfly lot. So this parcel here. Article 2.2 says that you pre-approve the subdivision of the parking deck parcel that we're doing. So basically, we're chopping off the section that you're trading. I'm chopping off the section that we're trading and making them separate parcels so that this is now a separate parcel from the rest of Lake Park. This is a separate parcel from the rest of the graduate parcel. And then section 2.3 says that you pre-approve us recombining the butterfly lot and the remainder of the graduate parcel into a single parcel. And then section 2.4 says that there's a variety of title issues here. There are remnants from the previous street grid that still exist. There's a little triangle that somewhere along the way was left in the name of the school district. And there's also HUD has to approve any, because it's part of the urban renewal effort, getting rid of Lick Skillet and putting a park there. HUD actually put an easement saying that you can't transfer this without our approval. And so those are some title issues that actually need to be fixed. And this says that ACC will do what they need to do to fix them. Sections 2.5 and 2.6, those are the forms of deeds that would be used in the transfer. They're there for your nighttime reading if you want to read them, but we just wanted to actually publish them so there was absolute clarity. Section 2.7 says that the ACC property, which is the butterfly lot, that needs to be rezoned before the swap happens. Because we want to know that that rezoning is going through for the swap. Now, the way it actually worked out, you approve that to go ahead and start and all be voted on at once. So that's a little bit irrelevant the way it's drafted now. And then the rezoning of the parking lot property, the parking deck property, that's going to go from CD, what it currently is, to G. That can't happen until the government owns it. So that has to happen after the swap occurs. And then closing is to occur on or before 91 days of the approval of the development agreement. So these, the time period is shown here in this timeline. So the first 30, so if the development agreement being approved is here, within the first 30 days, that ACC parcel needs to be subdivided. Within the first 90 days, that ACC parcel needs to be rezoned and the parking parcel needs to be subdivided. And that process is already in motion because that was what the CDO said on November 4th. And then curing the title defects also has to happen in that first 90 days. And then on or about 90 days, we swap. After that swap, we start rezoning the parking deck parcel because now that ACC owns it, it can be rezoned to G. And so that is the timeline contemplated in section 2. A couple other minor or not minor, a couple other provisions in section 2. You'll notice that the butterfly lot is quite a bit bigger than the public parking deck parcel. And there's a rule somewhere that says that when there's a land swap, the value has to be at least equal or more in favor of ACC. You can't do a land swap and lose out on it. So that basically there's a contemporaneous exchange of value that has to be at least equal. So butterfly lot appraised at $6.5 million. The public parking deck parcel appraised at $1.8 million. So at the closing, we're going to put in a $4.7 million construction escrow so that the value of the exchange is exactly equal. And so section 210 goes over that and more on that later because we'll draw from that construction escrow when we build the deck. Excuse me. Okay, section 211. That's just conditions to close. There's conditions to close in any kind of agreement where real estate's transferred. In this case, subdivision of the parcels, rezoning of the parcels, and the cure of any title issues are like the key conditions to close. Okay, 212 Hoyt Street easement. So you know that there's a section of Hoyt Street that is currently a private drive. There was concern from the city that, hey, we want access, we want public access over Hoyt Street. And you'll see as part of the project, we're actually extending Hoyt Street to empty out onto North. And so section 212 says that whenever we're complete with the project, we will dedicate a public access easement over Hoyt Street. And anytime within 3 years after the C of O, ACC can buy it for $1 if they want it. That concludes section 2, which deals with the land swap component. But section 3 deals with the core project. What's going to happen on the private side of this development? Section 3.1 just says, hey, the core project includes everything that comes after this. Section 3.2 says that, among other things, that the certificate of occupancy for the core project will not be issued before that's complete. So there's no way that we start both of these and then I'm complete with this, but I've dragged my feet on this and it's just not ready yet, because there's no way I'm getting a C of O unless that parking deck is complete. And this kind of shows you a comparison between the core concept, which was in the IGA, and the current concept, which is in the development agreement. It's extremely similar. At the time, the extension of Hoyt Street out onto North wasn't a thing that got added. That's really the only real difference. This is kind of blown up plan, just showing you the project that we're going to build. So we're proposing a 7-story building here, which would be by right under CD zoning. And then we'll be building a parking deck here. It's a 7-story parking deck. 2 of those stories are underground. And then we'll be refinishing the paving in front of the foundry building and using public access easements to make that a plaza that is accessible to everyone. And so the following slides show you the different sizes of the building and the different kind of public spaces that the building creates.
Could you just point out the parking for that's on site?
Sure.
Not the public parking deck?
Okay, so this was a confusing thing. So there is 2 levels of underground parking that are basically here. And then on top of that, there's 7 levels of parking that's right in the middle of the building. So the confusion that I heard earlier from one of the community members of, is it underground or is it in the middle of the building? It's both. So there's 2 levels of underground parking plus 7 levels of precast parking that's right in the middle of the building. This is a rendering kind of showing what that looks like. This is a view from Dougherty and Jackson, kind of showing the front door of the residential project. That way is Dougherty. And these are a few other renderings. Again, another shot from the main entry. This shot looks actually down into the Foundry Plaza. So you can see that there's this kind of brick massing here, the Foundry's here, and this becomes a public plaza. Bottom left actually shows the corner of Hoyt and Jackson. And so this new playground, we're moving it about 40 feet from where it is now, but it's still going to be located there because we did not want to disturb, that. If people go there and enjoy that, then that's fine with us. But additionally, we are, it was expressed, ACC expressed a desire to create another playground within Lake Park itself. So we are contributing to that. You will see a gate here. That was not intended to prohibit access. So if that makes people feel bad, we can take that out. And then this rendering bottom right shows one of these pocket parks that gets created along Jackson Street. And the idea is that we're activating Jackson Street with these pocket parks that would have public access easements over them, so that on the days when there's an art walk, there can be food trucks, there can be artists, setting up for stalls and whatnot, right in those pocket parks. This is a key plan that was done by our landscape architect. And so this is not actually in the development agreement, but this just shows you what we're going to build. So the Foundry Plaza, this just gives you an idea of how that's going to be kind of repaved. There will be a public access easement over that. And this could be used, we were thinking about how could this be used for like a weekend farmer's market. Maybe there's a cultural event or some kind of art fair that could be staged there, or like a community sports day or game day kind of programming. but we're open to cooperating on any of those to make that a public space for everyone in Athens to come to. These are the pocket parks I mentioned along Jackson Street. So Jackson is right where my pointer is now, and these pocket parks actually open up onto Jackson. And then there's the playground, which is right at the corner of Jackson and Hoyt. Again, we're showing a fence there. There does not need to be a fence there, if that turns everybody off.
For what it's worth, we would usually put a fence in a location like that so as to minimize the risk that children would enter the adjacent right of way. Maybe some of the conversation could be around the gate.
Right.
The current playground has a fence around it, correct?
I'm
pretty sure it does.
All right, so back to the legalese of the document that we're talking about. Section 3 just says that we're gonna pay the inclusionary zoning in lieu fee. That's it's a formulaic calculation, but it's roughly $7.8 million, and it's based on the precise unit mix. So we jumble around that design, it may go up or down a bit, but it's gonna be roughly $7.8 million. And this, just as a matter of process, gets paid before the building permit is issued. So there's no risk that we don't pay that we somehow build this building and don't pay that, because we can't even start until we pay that. And then 50% of that money will be used in specific census tracts, which I think was at first erroneously said in the IGA, and that was corrected. So it goes up from 950, well, it goes from 200 bedrooms per acre to 250 bedrooms per acre. So about a 25% increase.
By code.
Right. No, I understand that, but.
So 950 to 1412, something like that.
That's what I wanted to know.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Section 3.4, that says we have to build an ADA accessible pedestrian connection from the parking deck to the corner of Thomas and Doherty and North, and that has to be ADA accessible. And so if you look at this, there's a clearer version in, if you're looking at it on the screen, but there's a pedestrian connection easement right in front of the foundry. So right over that foundry plaza, there's a pedestrian connection easement that we have to provide before we get a certificate of occupancy. So we can't move anybody in until that is done, and there's a public access easement over it. Similarly, section 3 basically says we're gonna take these public plazas that we're creating and the playground along Jackson, and that's gonna have a public access easement over it as well. So everybody in Athens has the right to come there whenever they want. Section 3.6, that says we're gonna protect the foundry with a historic facade easement. So that allows us to reprogram the foundry from the inside, but the outside will be protected the way it is. Section 3.7, that deals with the artistic mural. And it basically says exactly what the IGA said, which is that we're gonna find a place of at least 1,000 square feet facing Jackson, and that's gonna be where the mural is. We're kind of showing that behind the playground right now. We're up to cooperate with ACC on where precisely that wants to go. Section 3.8 involves a master lease to the ADDA. And it says we're gonna provide up to 5,000 square feet in a retail space facing Jackson at a subsidized rental rate of $15 per foot. That equates to about $1,250 a month for 1,000 square foot space. And we'll build it out for them, a TI allowance of $40 per foot. And what they're gonna do is then sublease those spaces to makers and artisans and gallery users to help activate that space. This is an option. ADA may take it, may not. In any case, they don't actually owe us any rent unless they sublease the spaces. So if they choose to take that option and they fail to secure gallery users who want to go there, rent is not due until they actually secure someone who wants to go there for $1,250 a month for 1,000 square foot gallery. And that was our way of helping to activate this strip of Jackson with artistic related uses, which is kind of what it says in the North Athens downtown master plan. Section 3.9, that covers the logistics plan for the development generally. There's another, this kind of restated in section 4. This shows what's going to happen. There's 2 phases of the construction logistics because we're going to start on everything. That being our own private project. And you can see the underground parking here. See how the expanse of that parking is huge for the bottom level. So we're going to start construction on everything at once. And then at a certain point, we'll be done. About 12 months in, we'll be done with the public parking deck and we'll pull back that fence and Hoyt Street will connect in about a year. And then that will just be open to the public while we continue with the rest of our project. And so this just clarifies the 2-phase logistics plan of what's going to be closed and when. So you'll notice that Hoyt Street is closed for the first year because we're going to be resurfacing that. We have to extend it out to meet North Avenue, and this is going to be all under construction. But then after that's done, within the first year, that gets open to the public and construction continues on the rest of the private development. That's the balance of section 3. We only have section 4 left, and then I'll be almost done. Section 4 deals with the public parking deck itself. This is different because the way it works is that we are going to be a builder for the Downtown Development Authority. So we don't actually own the land that we're building this property on because the swap will have already occurred. And so section 4.1 says that the ADDA engages us to build the public parking deck, which shall include no less than 425 spaces. Sections 4.2 and 4.3, those are just the form of the actual contract we have with the architect and the builder, just because that's public information, it's a public building. And then section 4.4 has the plans and renderings of the parking deck. Notice there are ADA spaces on every single floor of this parking deck. Let's see here. So section 4.5, this shows what we anticipate the public parking deck budget to be. You'll notice in red, there is a contingency line of $1.5 million because it was early in the process when we drafted this and we wanted to be realistic. That comes out to the cost of $17 million or about $41,000 per stall of parking. So that's section 4.5 covers budget. Section 4.6 covers schedule, which is 477 days. After we get building permits, that's when the parking deck will be delivered. And that has fluff in there for me because I know that everything goes wrong. So likely a couple months sooner than. Section 4.7 just clarifies that we will be the applicant for all permits of the parking deck. Section 4.8, that covers the construction logistics plan, which is the exact same as section 3.9, which was the same thing. And then sections 4.9 and 4.10 say that before anything is issued, before any permits for any part of this development are issued, we will post a performance and payment bond so that if CORE for some reason goes away, we go out of business, if there's some kind of natural disaster that causes us to, I don't know, go away, there's maybe a war or something, you can pull that performance and payment bond, which would pay for the cost of building a parking deck. That protects ACC from the situation where CORE for some reason does not or cannot deliver that parking deck. Section 4.11 says that we're going to provide monthly progress reports to the ADDA because we're going to be building that parking deck on their behalf, and that we're going to give them a 60-day notice before we deliver it to them. Section 4.12 says that 120 days after we deliver the project to the ADDA, we're going to give them a packet with all waivers showing that everybody's been paid in full, all the operating manuals and everything, and then that bond that we posted will be released because our obligations will be fulfilled at that point in time. Section 4.13 just deals with insurance. We will insure the parking deck while it's under construction. ADDA will insure the parking deck after. And then section 4.14 deals with the reimbursement of those costs. So we will build the parking deck and we will finance it as part of our project. Despite that $17.6 million cost, the ADDA's obligation to reimburse us is capped at the lesser of 53% of the actual costs or $8.1 million, whichever is lesser. So if we don't use that contingency, it would even be less than $8.1 million. But it automatically goes to 53% of actual costs if that number is less than 8.1. So that kind of ensures that you only you have to reimburse the ratio above 200 spaces, which is what was contemplated in the IGA. And so we'll cover any cost overrun. So if the parking deck costs $19 million, we're on the hook to complete it anyway, and ACC is not at risk for that extra money. And then for the 8.1 or whatever it ends up being, we'll finance it. We'll build it. And then if you guys want, we'll give you a note at 5% interest, 15-year amortization, which is about as low of an interest rate as you can get these days. You can prepay it at any time, and then otherwise you can just pay it back over 15 years. And the thought was that you'd have revenue from the parking deck to offset this payment. And then also no payments are actually due until January 1st, the January 1st after the core project delivers, because for legal reasons, I can't accept interest until I have a large amount of rent income. And so for that reason, we're just delaying the clock until after the core, the private residential development delivers. So for that first year, it's free. Section 415, remember that $4.7 million construction escrow that we posted whenever we swapped? That says that we can draw down from that to help pay for the parking deck, given the fact that we're paying for over $9 million of it.
But that $9 million, the $9 million, is that sort of equivalent to the, and I might have spaced out here, there's a lot of information.
Sure.
The 9 million, is that equal to the core part that you said you paid for the 200, like 100 and the Athens-Clarke County paid for anything over that?
Well, I understand your confusion because it's been negotiated to the point where it doesn't make much sense now.
Yeah.
But when it started, that was what it was meant to be. And then they negotiated with me down at 8.1. So that's actually less than 47%. But like conceptually, that was what it was meant to cover.
But that's the 8.1 that you're paying. No, you're not paying.
No, ADDA is paying up to 8.1.
Okay, what are you guys paying?
The difference between 8.1 and 17.6, so 9.5.
Okay, and so then the 4.7 in escrow is going to which part? Going to the ADDA part?
It's going to the totality of the parking deck in general, because we're financing. So it's not offsetting the 8.1 that they owe us.
Okay, but yet it's the money that's supposed to make the difference between the two prices of the land. Okay.
That's correct, but you'll see how that works out in a later slide.
Okay.
It should all be
focus in again on
considered.
Yeah,
it should all be considered.
A lot of details. I mean, I'm trying to, but then I start thinking about something.
Yeah.
And I get lost. All right.
So section 416, that basically says that we're going to build a bridge from the parking deck into the park so that there's an ADA connection straight from the parking deck into Lake Park. And as part of that, there's going to be structural members underground in that first 30 feet of Lake Park. And it says that ACC is going to give the ADDA an easement so that those foundations can be there. And so that easement is just to facilitate us actually running a bridge into Lake Park so there can be a flat walkway instead of having to walk uphill. Now we're in section 5. Luckily, it's only this slide. So section 5.1 says that we're going to do a traffic study and we're going to do any improvements that it recommends. And that traffic study has already been done and submitted to staff. And section 5.2 says that we're going to deconstruct and reconstruct the Hoyt House at a location approved by ACC. So you'll see here, we've done a historic, there's the east block of the Hoyt House, which is almost 200 years old. And then there is kind of these north and west blocks, which are only 49 years old. And so we're proposing to deconstruct and reconstruct the 200-year-old portion of the Hoyt House at a location that is approved by ACC. We separately, not in the development agreement, have an MOU going with Historic Athens to actually relocate that building to a site they control, which has not been identified yet, and give them $250,000 to build it out for additional office space that they will use. And this is the slide that I was referring to where all of the kind of pluses and minuses get added up. So this shows what is core getting, what is ACC getting, And then what is the net benefit to ACC? Because there are some negative dollars here, right? So going down the core side first, we're getting the butterfly lots, that's $6.5 million. We're getting a promissory note to the maximum of $8.1 million or 53% of whatever that is. And then we're getting some reduced utility connection fees because as part of utility work that we'll be doing in order to help the Bethel Homes project get going, we have a 30% reduction of utility fees, which is $700,000. So that's $15.3 million of benefit to core. What does ACC get? All right, well, they get the parking deck parcel, that's 1.8. They get a $17.6 million parking deck. They do have promissory note that we're gonna give them, plus the interest. The parking deck is gonna have expenses over 15 years, but it also has revenue over 15 years. So that's all kind of contemplated in this section. They're getting $7.8 million of in lieu fee. They're getting off-site sewer improvements, which we're paying for. And then this is a staff estimate or allowance for lay park improvements. You'll notice it's only $500,000 and in the previous staff report, it said $1 million. That's because I've been working with Andrew on the characterization of this park that we're building because we're giving $275,000 for a park. That's not causing an additional $500,000 of liability for a nicer park. That's like asking for a Cadillac after I gave you a Chevy, right? So we've taken out the $500,000 that would have gone to upgrading the park that we're providing into an even nicer park. And that's just a separate decision that you guys can make if you guys want it. So that $500,000 is meant to include connecting the Lake Park path to the bridge that we provide from the parking deck and all kind of associated lighting. And then also ADA ramps into the community building, which you should do whether or not this project goes, but it's in there. Some additional developments. Forgot the punchline. So the punchline is you're getting $29 million worth of benefit and we're getting 15 from you. So that means you're making out to the tune of about $14 million in this development agreement.
Which is half the number that was in the headline in the local paper.
Well,
Yeah, okay.
They might have looked at the 29 figure.
Right.
Once you subtract out the value that you're giving, it's 14.
And it doesn't include the inclusionary zoning and TAD.
It does include, it does not include TAD. It does not include ongoing payments like tax payments. It does include the inclusionary zoning payment. But these are kind of those other monetary benefits that are just ongoing. So this is just extra taxes that we are projected to pay. And so a TAD contribution increases to $820,000 per year, every year, forever, or for the length of the TAD. I don't know when that expires. There's additional funds to the school district of $1.3 million, even though as a building that primarily is catered to students, we're unlikely to have a lot of kids here. So we're not going to increase the burden on the school system. We are going to increase the amount of tax revenue they get. And then there are some other smaller increases to the downtown tax district in the general fund, $70,000 and $33,000. So this is all these ongoing benefits that happen every single year after this project goes into effect. And then there's some non-monetary benefits. So the parcel utility, before the development agreement, you got a weird shaped parcel. It's hard to build on. This development agreement squares off the parcel. It makes it easy to build on. The foundry is at risk of demolition. It's not protected at all. This project protects it. The Hoyt House, despite being 200 years old, is not protected at all. This project protects that. Public plazas, you got none right now. We're going to build them for you. The playground, you got a 6,700 square foot playground. We're going to build you one almost the same size, 40 feet away. Compatibility with the art walk. There is no pedestrian connectivity from the art walk into those parcels now. And we are trying to think about that in our design and giving public access easements so that compatible uses can be located adjacent to the art walk. And then for the parking, we're taking 148 surface spaces. We're delivering 425 structured spaces. So those are the non-monetary benefits involved in this project. This next section tries to answer questions that I know that you're going to ask me. So I'm just going to answer them now. So first question. First question, and a big one is, so you got affordable housing, $7.8 million, whoopee. Why don't you put that on your site? And the answer is, that's not the best way to use those funds. Because if I go by the affordable housing ordinance, I got to create 28 units of affordable housing on my site. By contrast, if you take a look at this note of phase 2 sources and uses here, you'll see that ACC contributed $3.5 million and they created 146 units. That's 24K per unit. So if you just did that same thing with the $7.8 million, you'd create over 300 units of affordable housing instead of the 28 that I would create by building it on site. The reason why this works is because you target affordable housing developers who have access to federal tax incentives, forgivable loans that are only available to developers that are doing pure affordable housing development. I can't get those sources the way that they can, and using that $7.8 million as gap financing for the people who are going to build it is going to create more units than if I put it on the site. Second question is like, what is this? What is the sewer work? What is it really? And what does it really create? And how much of that are you using? So this diagram shows, this is the intersection of College and Willow. This is College Street going over the Oconee River, connecting on to MLK. So you have the red section, which we're upsizing a pipe, and then the yellow section, which we're just tilting it at a higher angle because it couldn't be upsized because it puts too much weight on that bridge. And so that creates 500,000 gallons per day of extra capacity. Of that, we're going to use about 140. About 360 will remain available for everyone else. And that will cover the rest of all the Bethel Homes projects, even though that capacity is doled out in a kind of first come, first served basis. So it might serve other projects as well.
And one quick note about that. Just for context, 360,000 gallons of remaining capacity per state standards, which we follow, is somewhere between 3,000 and 3,600 additional rooms that could be created in that kind of white area, if you remember, to the west. So it's not infinite capacity, but it is significant capacity.
Here's a frequently asked question. How will access to Lay Park look like during construction? There's a programming Lay Park that the children use over the summertime. It's been brought up to me and we've thought about it. So during that phase 1 of the logistics, we're actually going to put temporary parking right where that playground is, because you'll notice that Hoyt Street is actually going to be closed off because we're going to be extending it to meet north and adding a parking deck down here. Also notice that the parking deck is barely visible above the trees. So more on that later. But you'll see there's a bus shown right where I'm pointing this clicker. And that drop-off route would actually go through the temporary parking. And then you take a left and stop right in front of the Linden House. That is the proposed route for bus drop-offs. This is not in the development agreement because we want the ability to be flexible to do a better idea if someone has a better idea. But that's the current way that we're showing in that first year where Hoyt Street is closed off. How are people going to access? How are the children going to get to Lay Park? Another frequently asked question, is this going to tower over Lay Park and throw shadows onto Lay Park? And so this is a couple of diagrams to show what I think is going to happen. So this actually shows that there are trees that are going to cover up that parking deck. The parking deck's actually embedded in a hill, so it's only 42 feet. So from where the bridge comes out and meets Lay Park, it's 42 feet higher than that. So while it looks pretty big from the other side, which is the rendering that we did, from the Lay Park side, it's half as tall. And then this second image here is a solar study that shows the summer solstice and winter solstice shadows. So the shortest day of the year, longest day of the year. And this shows, so the bottom image will show at 3 p.m. on December 21st, what are those shadows going to look like? How long are they going to be? And so this shows that with more honesty than I'm comfortable with, but it kind of shows you that that shadow, while long, doesn't really go into Lay Park.
Eggnog and margarita is not shown.
Yeah, there you go. Additionally, If there's concern about the view shed from Lake Park, I would ask you to remember that if this project didn't happen, we could still we could still build a humongous building within this zoning envelope right here, and the effect would be the same as what's currently contemplated.
So there's been a lot of questions that we've received from the commission about allocations for parking within Lake Park, and this slide speaks to that. There's a complementary IGA with the Downtown Development Authority as it relates to this deck and its operations and financing. In that, it specifically says that there should be a minimum of 52 spaces grouped together for visitors from Lake Park, and that they should be located near the pedestrian bridge or close to an elevator so as to provide good access through that bridge. I do also want to point out, as we've negotiated this development agreement, there have been a number of things that weren't contemplated at the time of the IGA, and the pedestrian bridge is one of those. Initially, all pedestrian flow into Lake Park would have gone down to ground level and then gone up a fairly steep grade where Point Street will be. And when we pointed this out to the development team and said, hey, really the best solution we feel for what's proposed is to do a flyover bridge, they said, where do you want to land it? So I think that speaks to how they've approached this from a fair sense. That being said, this allocation is within the control and remains within the control of the mayor and commission. So there's a further language that says that it may be mutually amended as part of the annual review process. What I have shared with you all is that amending it is within your control, but there are budgetary implications that really impact whether or not this is, if you will, revenue neutral, or if there's an expense that would then be per the parking management agreement split between Athens-Clarke County bearing 60%, ADDA bearing 40%. So you can see three scenarios below. One of the things I'll note is that for those 52 spaces, we have budgeted $0 of revenue. The reality is that there's potentially revenue in there. So for example, it's likely that we would do 3 hours of free parking, because what we don't want is we don't want to have spaces set aside for Lake Park that are then utilized by people who aren't using Lake Park, right? We want to create incentives that benefits park users, but doesn't. So that can be done with verification. I forget what it's called, but
Voucher of some sort.
yeah, and it's the same thing you get at UGA, right? I go into their parking deck and I swipe my little card from having visited there, and my parking is then comped. So we've assumed $0. The reality is that there's likely to be some dollars. Even if you think about after hours use, Lake Park closing at dark, downtown doesn't close at dark, the arena doesn't close at dark, the adjacent developments don't close at dark. And so there are some revenue generating hours, but better to under promise and over deliver. The other thing that's been contemplated is that because of the position of this park, likely the best use is for monthly spaces. And projecting forward, kind of looking at the adjacent market, it's contemplated that the recommendation would be for the mayor and commission to approve those spaces at $125 a month. Certainly, the commission has full authority to set those spaces higher or lower with the way we've structured this. The reason for monthly spaces, another question that comes up quite often is, well, are you just building a parking deck for the adjacent residents? ADDA is here. I think they might speak to it later, but in the conversations I've had with them, they've said, well, no, because ironically, there's such demand for monthly parking. We anticipate we can lease this up and actually have those spaces utilized before CORE is making its spaces available to students or their tenants. So there is no commitment whatsoever in the development agreement or the IGA that any of the parking spaces within the deck would be used for the development. But it could be that the commission would like to see more hourly spaces instead of monthly spaces. And so using the data that we've collected from monitoring our own downtown parking performance, when we've looked at purely designated hourly spaces across the three public decks, it has averaged $58 per space per month in net revenue or gross revenues. And so what you can see is that that changes the calculations a bit. If you were to add in those spaces and have a 50 additional, then you would see about a $40,000 deficit that would need to be accounted for. Similarly, if you wanted to take some kind of Goldilocks zone there in the middle and just have more kind of zero revenue generating spaces for Lay Park, it's about the same impact. So the takeaway here is there's no commitments on behalf of this deck for the adjacent development. It would be managed by ADVA under the parking management agreement, as are two other decks that we manage now. And the allocation of spaces and the rates at which are applied remain within the purview of the mayor and commission.
All right. And then since November 4th, it's hard to ignore that there's a certain tepidness and skepticism from the Black communities of Athens, right? And when I saw that on November 4th and even before, I knew my job wasn't done, because this is a big project. It's symbolically important, has to be a win for everyone, in my opinion. And so we have reached out to a few key community members and organizations. And we had a couple ideas on how to make this more of a win for the Black community. Idea number one, conduct outreach programs to maximize opportunities for local minority participation in the construction of the project. So in coordination with the Black Chamber of Commerce, we are going to be running outreach workshops for people who want to be involved in the construction of this project. Our first one is tomorrow at the Foundry, and there will be several additional workshops. Idea number two, establish a scholarship fund to cover the cost of tuition, fees, books for tech school, trade school, vocational school, what have you, for individuals identified and qualified by the Black Chamber of Commerce. So we propose to establish a $400,000 scholarship to fund the efforts of those people, and that would be administered by the Northeast Georgia Black Chamber of Commerce. And then finally, we're dealing with a historically Black neighborhood that was removed by urban renewal. And we've got a Foundry building that's literally got fingerprints of Black slaves in the bricks. And so not wanting to participate and systematically eroding the rights of Black people to be here, we thought it would be symbolically powerful to offer a lease of 4,500 square feet of this building for $1 a year, Black Chamber of Commerce. That is in their hands now, so we're negotiating that in good faith. And we build that out as flex office so that they could actually offer memberships to affiliated organizations at smaller nonprofits that do work in that community. So we're inviting Black community to stay here and make this a center for promoting Black prosperity, which I think is, a symbolically powerful move. And I think it was, was needed after talking to some key community members. And so that's where I'm going to leave it. That's everything that's happened between November 4th and now.
All right, so got the thorough presentation, kind of on top of the visual presentations we've had earlier in the year, the oral presentation that Bob provided at our meeting, and the written work that everybody has seen. I want to go ahead and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Andy, for doing this presentation. Again, I appreciate my colleagues pushing for this work session. I think it's vital that the community understand what's happening and what's going on with this particular project. I do have some questions for our staff. So when we was looking at this, starting this, involvement and before we got involved, from a programming perspective, what has been the thought process moving forward? And I appreciate you answering when we drop off and pick up, and that's good. But from a programming perspective for us, right now, how many young people are we serving? Then once the summer comes, how many young people are we serving? And did anybody think about what impact this may have moving forward in the future on young people that may continue to use this particular park. You understand?
Sure. So, Lay Park has a number of kind of programmatic uses. One of those is summer camp. For those of you that are familiar, have been around the commission for a while, Athens' limiting factor to summer camps is facility space and staff, but predominantly facility space. We put a summer camp in every nook and cranny that we have within our leisure services portfolio. And so in our discussions with leisure services, there's absolutely no desire, recommendation, or thought otherwise to discontinue summer camps in this. There will continue to be summer camps here. And so we'll need to coordinate what the logistics of summer camp drop-off looks like. When you think about the program itself within Lake Park, so you've got the ball fields and you got the pool and so on. The programs that are offered by leisure services will continue to have a focus on youth, especially in the community center. For those of you that haven't been there, there's a teen lab, kind of a maker space in there that's got the 3D printer and the modeling software and all that. And so that'll continue to be. And in fact, we do a number of programs in partnership with local schools and the school district. And so one of the things that we've been kind of contemplating all along is how do we maintain school bus drop off in a way that makes sense? So you only drop kids off one side of a bus, and you need to maintain some sight lines of those children until they were within the purview of our staff. And so that's been contemplated in even in the logistics planning that you saw. And then similarly, we will adjust through Hoyt Street as it comes available. So what's likely to happen is a bus would come off of North Avenue down Hoyt Street, be at that existing driveway up into the community center and do a drop off there, just as if they were stopping in front of any other county building downtown. It would be, in the right of way, if you will. What I think leisure services would share is that as they've seen downtown grow, the residents of downtown use the pump. And so as that mix changes, that's present in the non-programmed portion. So for example, as we have seen more students come into downtown over the last decade, it's more likely that you go out there in the afternoon and there's a group of teenage to college age boys that have taken a pickup game of softball or kickball and are using the field. Now, it's not programmed, so anybody is welcome to come use the field, but there are changes in park usership as you create new bodies near a park.
And that's my concern. So we add 1,400 beds down to that area. And feel like some of those kids then gonna feel like, well, it's not gonna be a place I can come to now because, to your point, teenagers or the college students take it over to the gym, take them to ball fields. There's no place now for me to go. So, and again, y'all heard me say, I'm thinking long-term on down the road. So those are some of my concerns. My second question is, and somebody, I think, Dr. Allen brought us up with the voting. That's a huge voting site. Actually, probably one of the largest in the county. What happens, especially with construction, we got a major election coming up in May, November. What happens to that voting site?
Sure. In the near term, we've already been working with election staff to look at alternative locations for voting. And so examples might include the Snipes Water Resources Center, the Council on Aging. You could potentially even do Fire Station 1. That's still being discussed amongst the Board of Elections. That really is focused on this construction period where you have a lot of activity and changes to circulation. Following that, it will be the Board of Elections purview as to recommend what site is being used within this precinct. And so it could continue to be the community center. I would suggest to you that the community center may not be as good a space, even under current conditions, as the Linden House. So it's really a topic for the board to take up as they see how the community evolves. But in the near term, they would be relocating it just because of the impacts to parking and circulation.
It will have an impact, depending on how, how fast we get information about, I think it can have an impact on voting. And I've said this to the county manager, I think y'all really need to rethink that about moving at this particular time, knowing up elections coming up in May and in November, and see how we make him work that. Again, and that's a staff thing, and maybe this is not the time to have that discussion, but again, I think we really need to take a look at that. And see whether or not can we maintain that particular space, because I can tell you when people possibly have to move the voting area, they either tend not gonna show up, they get filled, they go somewhere else. So I think we need to really think really hard about, we're thinking about moving a voting precinct as an election is getting ready to come up.
I think we'd be happy to share that with the board.
In the near future. And then my last question is, and let me say this, and I met with Andy and them last week. I am, because I ain't got phone calls, say, well, why you against the project? I'm not against the project. I am against when I think young people may be impacted and where they may not feel welcome to a space that is set for them in the future. So everything that you all have proposed, we thank you. We appreciate it, but so I'm not so much against that, but I am against when young folks don't have the opportunity to possibly as the future, and what the young lady talked about when she used to come there. They need to feel that they're welcome and they're still part of their space. And I just can see adding 1,400 beds, and with that community center being that close, it's gonna get used by a lot of college students in a public place. But it's gonna get used by a lot of college students. Young people coming there, so, where do I go? Where do I fit? Where do I fit in this? Yeah. And I guess my last question is the parking thing. So on your parking there, Andy, you're doing 650 at the
We're doing 585.
585
In our building.
in your building.
And that includes 0 compact spaces, because we could probably squeeze out more if we put compact spaces in there, but the numbers right now do not include compact spaces.
And so where's your overflow go? So you got those spaces for where do your overflow go for the rest of the parking? Is that for the deck that we are proposing, putting on in front of Tom Blake? Because if you got 580 spaces, got 1,400 beds, the number don't match.
That's true. I mean, as we've built projects across the nation in markets like Athens, we see that around 40 to 45% parking ratio is typically what we need. Because
they don't, let me down work here. Every kid, if they're UGA student, now seeing those kids got cars.
Well, I guess I would offer this. The project has not proposed any waivers from local code as it relates to parking. So what they have is a minimum amount of parking code. And then the inclusionary zoning ordinance actually allows a reduction in that because of their proximity to a bus line. So broadly, if the commission has concerns about the amount of parking that's being designated within sites, that should be addressed in ordinance, because this is the by right approach that any downtown developer can take.
I get that. You hear my question. Where's the overflow gonna go? I mean, the numbers don't match. 1,400 beds, 500 plus spaces. Where's that overflow of parking gonna go? Either gonna go in the street, it's gonna go to Leonard, where's it gonna go? Or is it gonna go to the deck that we're proposing to build? So that's all I'm asking.
it's probably going to go into a combination of places, but let me ask you this.
Okay.
GA is going to increase enrollment by about 600 kids per year. They published this.
Mhm.
Those kids are going to come whether or not we build this project or not.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So right now, I'm proposing 900 total spaces and there's only 180 there now. So economically speaking, UGA is driving this ship on how many students are here. And we are providing a lot of parking spaces to the economic benefit of that whole equation. Where if this project weren't to get built, the same number of students would be here. It would just be a worse problem because there would be 900 less spaces.
a matter of opinion, but I'll let it go, so. But again, the number, just know that number don't work, so.
Got Commissioner Myers, Johnson, Thorpe.
Yeah, I got a bunch of little things, and I apologize because I'm coming down with a cold again. So I'm not as focused as I would be otherwise. You know, and I'm upfront. I wrote about this in my newsletter. I asked for people's opinions. I tried to put both sides of I put my point of view, but I put the other side too. Link to the flagpole article. Most of the people who reached out to me were not supportive of it. And this is something I brought up. It doesn't seem to be getting a lot of coverage from anyone else but me and my couple of constituents over there. But, student housing, which doesn't really have to do with your project. So like if it was a hotel project with the exchange for the land, I'd be okay with that. One of the things with the student housing, when I was looking at that Foundry Street, that area, I go by that place. I got my little e-bike. I go by the Accolade and I go by the land. What's that next to the firefly? This becomes student lands, and you can't get into the Accolade. It's all locked up inside. There's places you can get and not. So it becomes this sort of like, just this little like student housing thing, and it becomes a student housing world as well. So I'm looking at the Foundry, and in fact, as I was coming in here today, I'm looking at the retail on the bottom and the Foundry space. Maybe the future will teach me otherwise, but I'm looking at it now and going, that's not going to really be a place at Foundry Plaza where people are going. They're going to want to go over to the other side of this big student housing. Like I said, I'm over there on the Firefly. I love the Firefly, but the Firefly over there by Dudley Park and such, and Dudley Park itself, if you were a UGA student here, you'd think the Firefly and Dudley Park were part of UGA. I'm there, and there are other people there as well, and that makes sense. It makes sense. They live there and use it. So I'm not against that, but that's the reality of how it plays out. I'm also not against you guys making money. That's fine. But sometimes again, when I see this in the paper and they're like, oh, we're getting $30 million. Well, how much are you renting these things for? Like $1,100 a bedroom? That's kind of the going rate, right?
Yeah, we're gonna
Well,
size our rents to be competitive.
your 7.8 million, I guess I'm not even asking questions, but I'm pointing these things out. I do have some questions, but comes out to like 16,833 per bedroom that we're getting for the inclusionary zoning. Well, I did the math on that 462 rooms. And you guys are pulling in, I know you got maintenance, but like almost 6.1 million a year. So you're not, someone said, oh, they're giving us all this stuff. Well, you guys are getting stuff too. And so I just want to point that out. That's what you're supposed to do. You're a business person. So one thing about the Foundry though, the question is, it's a facade that's being saved, right? The interior, how that's going to be used, there's no guarantee that that's going to still be an entertainment establishment. Is there anything? Because there's just the word on the street.
We plan to keep the music venue there. The Northeast Georgia Black Chamber of Commerce will have a lease option for 4,500 square feet of that building. So that.
Like where but is that all going to be changed on the inside? Like where the rooms are that they use for events, the event spaces and such?
Right. So it could potentially be changed. So there's a back part, there's a breezeway that cuts that building.
Right.
Back part's 2 stories. The front part is 1 story.
Right.
There's a ballroom on either side.
Right.
So at least one of those is going to be transformed into flex office for the Northeast Georgia Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
The other one, we haven't found a user yet. Probably retail that will go well with a music venue next to it.
But is there a guarantee that music venue is going to stay there?
I can't guarantee it can't operate.
That's fine. The parking deck, back to the parking deck thing again. I know other people I hear you all saying that, well, that's going to be used by other people already. But again, most likely a lot of those other people are going to be students who need spaces from the other places. So that might be the best thing in the world, but it just sure does sound like we're building, as I've made before, we're building public parking, and so forth for our student population, which might be the best thing in the world if that's the community decision or the reality there. But you know, like just yesterday, some of us had a tour of the new track facility, and one of the UGA officials there said to us, well, if only you guys would build more, you know, hotels. We need hotels. Like, that's what we need here. And then they were talking about all the land they have. So, you know, we often talk about how little land we have. They have land. There could be some, so this is not you again, but when we have these renewed open discussions with university, I mean, looking at the place of land, of parking as well as living, I think is an important thing to look at. But the parking deck, when I looked at some of those pictures were really helpful, but that parking deck is, you know, I had kids I brought to stuff. That's a pretty long walk to get your kids up there and go from that parking deck all the way to the pool. And maybe if your kids are 9 to 10, but when your kids are 4 or 5, I'm not sure that's the park you're going to be going to anymore because it's a long walk. It's over there to that. So that the use of the park, it's just going to make it, it's going to make it a little bit more difficult for everyone to use it. And I think the reality is just like Commissioner Fisher is saying, that the makeup, as is normal, will evolve in that park. You know, and so that is a reality. That's just a reality that we're looking at is there. In the when you mentioned the inclusionary zoning before, is there a reduction? Did that affect the parking spots, or is it just for, so what was the inclusionary zone? I mean, I know that's our policy and they're using it.
A component of the inclusionary zoning code is that when you use the inclusionary zoning component of the code, you get a reduction in the requirement.
I understand that, but I'm asking how much is being used?
20%.
How much?
You get a 20% reduction on.
But they're using that 20%. So they're using the 20% reduction in parking, and then they're using the increase in bedrooms.
That's right.
Correct.
And I don't think.
That's
we use the
fine.
Full 20%, but I can get back to you with the.
On
exact
that.
We are using
Yeah.
less than would
Right.
otherwise be required.
Okay, so that's just, I mean, to me, that is also, you know, maybe it's the best thing in the world and that will be proved out over time, but it seems like it's an ongoing thing where, you know, we as a community, whether we want to keep the park, keep some of downtown for that, there isn't, you know, people will talk about the taxes, but other uses of that property that we could trade with the parking spots would also get tax income. Being so, you know, those are my concerns. I appreciate everything you've said in here. Oh, about the art walk stuff's in there. I thought in a previous presentation that we had, we were told that the Downtown Development Authority was not really that interested in renting out those spaces.
So they're
Yeah.
here, if you'd like to hear from them directly.
Yeah, but did I remember that?
That is,
Would you like
that
to
is
hear from
correct.
DDA directorship?
Sure.
And one of the, well, before, as they get up here, one of the things I'll share is that this is an interesting component of the development agreement because it is actually not in the IGA whatsoever.
Uh-huh.
It was in the 2020 version, in some form of it, of that IGA. But then when this IGA came forward, this was put into the development agreement and we carried it forward. So with that, I would ask if.
David or Linda, do you want to speak to the prospect of some sort of art use of some of the interior spaces?
Sure, I
Under
mean,
DDA programming?
To go back to the beginning, we wholeheartedly agree with the development concept that there needs to be some publicly accessible commercial traffic on the street level of all our downtown developments. That's important. It's important to recognize that this part of downtown isn't necessarily amenable to that kind of street level retail. We recognize that one day maybe, but not now. And we have to recognize that there are some synergies available with the Linden House being there and this all and Jackson Street already publicly approved as an art wall. So it lends to the conclusion that this is an area that could be right and amenable to having some artistic galleries and maker spaces down there, which has been one of Dee Dee Dunphy's desires for many years
Right.
before she retired. So yes, we're all, and this what came forward to us from board member Girtz's recommendation that we could use these small spaces to community good, which also attracts folks downtown, which is what the DDA is all about.
That was somewhat inspired from a project that I know many of us have seen in Greenville, South Carolina, adjacent to the Reedy Falls Park, where there was a parking deck built with some shallow.
Right, I do remember that.
Part of the component.
I don't know if they're subsidized, but then the information we had in the last report is not up to date and accurate, that the Downtown Development Authority is interested in that now.
I'm not sure where that information.
I don't know if that was ever in a report.
It was in one of, I mean, I didn't.
That was in a
look it up.
It was in a Q&A, I believe.
It's a Q&A on that. So because I know that, that I've had people say something to me about, oh, that's going to continue that way and the foundry is going to continue that way. And I'm like, I'm not sure that's 100% certain or not. So
I think maybe where that confusion came from is certainly as part of the Washington Street Public-Private Partnership that this government and the DDA was involved in, is Athens-Clarke County nor the DDA wanted to be landlord of those street level retail spaces. And the negotiation that we worked out with the developer back when I was on the commission was that the private sector was completely on the hook for those, to bear the pain and the profit for those. That philosophy may have seeped through on this project, but for users that are going to create, that artistic footprint along the Jackson Street Art Walk at the doorstep of the Linden House Art Museum, is a different proposal.
thank you.
Everything, Commissioner?
I think so. I mean, I guess it's still far away. I still obviously, this is very helpful. It's good to have these questions. I'm checking out my other things in here. I have that mural. I think I asked a really straightforward question about how the size of that mural, how did that compare to the mural that's on by the Costa building?
Yeah, the mural on the Costa building is approximately 1,500 square feet. The development agreement prescribes a minimum of 1,000 square feet.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. I have several rapid fire questions and a couple of multi-sentence response questions. Okay, so I'll start with one multi-sentence question is, can you share with us the details from the traffic study, like high level details, like what did you learn from the traffic study that was conducted for this project?
So I know that we'll be changing the intersection of Dougherty, Thomas, and North to look like, apologies. To look like this. So we'll actually be adding a signal here. So, and then realigning. So, to actually go into the project, instead of going into the foundry kind of at this angle to Dougherty, you're actually turning and coming in at a 90-degree angle, which is safer and more intuitive.
Yeah.
That said, though, I'm not a traffic engineer, Buck, my civil engineer, can probably speak more on exactly what was learned in terms of the load on every intersection.
Yeah, I was
they're getting
curious
better or
about
worse.
the additional cars. How many more additional cars would be on the road as a result of this?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer that. So we studied 8 intersections. That's above and beyond what we typically study, but that was in coordination with Athens-Clarke County Public Works and Traffic Engineering Department. So this development here generates probably about 5% of additional traffic to this intersection. What's worth noting, we can go into detail. What's worth noting is most of these intersections, we grade intersections on an A through F threshold, right? So most of these intersections along Doherty Street are currently around a level D, the C. This development does not worsen the existing conditions.
I have a lot of common sense, and for the record, I'm not being rude. I don't agree. I don't believe that.
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm happy to share that traffic study with you. It is prepared by a licensed traffic engineer certified by the state of Georgia.
Yes, I don't need to read it. It's gonna say whatever someone wants it to say. I would say that.
Respectfully, no, it's going to say what our sub-consultant developed. We do that independently and professionally.
Let me share, there was a woman that commented about going to a meeting earlier in the week, and there were a number of representatives from various Clarke County departments who had not received the report to review it and read it, had no idea of some of the components. Several statements were made that was discussed today about it not, the walking distance from the deck to the facility is that far, 100 feet. And a representative said, no, that's 500, at least 500. Someone that has credentials and initials behind their name, they said, no, that's 500. I didn't hear you address the issue of ADA, walking 100 or 500. That's still a long way. If you're a mother with 3 kids and one of your kids is special needs and you have, a wheelchair, it's still a lot. And I just didn't hear that address.
I hear you. And whenever I was addressing ADDA, it's more about flat than distance. I know it's both, right? But what we've been designing is kind of a flat road because otherwise it's not ADA compliant. The slope is too much to walk up that street. And so what we've designed is actually flat enough to be considered ADDA. There are certain slopes that if you're below a certain slope, it's considered, you could have a wheelchair and stop and you wouldn't roll, And so that's really what we've been working towards. And I hear you that it is a longer walk. There's also a much flatter walk than walking from here up a hill to get to the community center.
I think one of my colleagues actually commented that why not across the street? I will tell you this. When I turned 50, all of a sudden I had hip issues and knee issues and ankle issues. But when I was 19 and 20 and 21, I could walk all over campus. So one of my colleagues asked that question, why not switch the parking decks? So the people who are attending, the Lake Park, parking is closer. I do understand this, so I'm dealing with that in my district for a neighborhood, so I understand that part. I just want to highlight that is going to be a problem. I don't think traffic considerations were considered at all, not throughout the entire process. And I'm saying that based on the numbers. Originally, the bedrooms were 912. And let's say that, 100% of the people have cars. And then it bumped up to 912, and I think it bumped up to 1,420 or around that number. I agree with my colleague, Dexter. Everybody has a car, and I can't believe this. Some students have more than one car, and then they have a moped. You're creating a parking challenge before you even start construction, before you even break ground. And that's something that we are going to have to deal with. We are going to have to respond to that. We're going to have to spend money to address that after this, I'm sure, beautiful edifice raised. And that's the real thing. It's happening in other areas of our community. Put my glasses on for the rapid fire.
Could I respond to that?
Oh,
real
yes,
quick?
sir.
So I think it's helpful to think of the parking system as a system and not a localized condition because people park wherever they can. And if there's not room in one place, there's another. So you have Athens, you have 30% of the population being students, and that number is going to grow by about 600 students per year per UGA's growth plan, which they may or may not achieve, right? And so thinking about that, you've got to admit that is going to be a problem whether or not this development goes forward, right? That's going to be an ongoing systematic challenge of where do all these new people park? And so I just want to point that out. And then secondly, I do want to point out that as the site currently is, one way in, one way out, right? And what we've designed, we got one way in here, we got a way in here, we got a way out here. So while yes, there's 586 more cars pulling into this building, there's also multiple ways out. And so period, 586 cars is more than what's there now. That's going to increase traffic. I have to concede that, that's true. But there are also more ways to get out of the site, which helps, number one. Number two, students tend to use their cars less than non-students because they can walk to class. They don't have to drive to work every single day. And a lot of times it takes more effort to drive to Campus Park and park and then walk where you're going. So this is going to be car storage for a lot of them, where they go out to the grocery store on the weekends. Yeah, they'll use their car. They're not using their cars every day. So it's less traffic than would be created otherwise. If the clientele were, for example, an office or even a hotel, it might be less traffic than those populations that are driving every single day.
Okay. Thank you. So these benefits for the Black folks. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't, it rubbed me the wrong way, but that's the phrasing that was introduced to you. That's not you. I get it. My question is though, the generous benefit, is that going to be an annual contribution or is that just 1 year?
That is a one-time contribution. And so that was sized based on tuition from Athens-Tech to cover 25 people to go to college. Basically, that's how that was sized. And so that's a one-time contribution. And in the agreement that we have in front of them now, that the day we get our building permit is when we fund, or 30 days after we get our building permit is when we fund that. So.
Okay, so so if they don't have the funding to stay there, or someone is willing to pay more, that program leaves. That
So what do you mean? Oh, for the
Northeast
space for the foundry?
Yes.
So that is currently, so that's a 5-year lease for $1 a year.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
And then
5 years.
as long as they distribute the 400K, they get 3 more options of 5 years. So it's 20 years of the ability to occupy that space.
Now, this is a question. Did you mention earlier that the Hoyt Street building will be operated by Historic Athens or something with?
There's an MOU out there suggesting that. That is what I think the intent is. However, as me, private developer, I don't care who takes it, as long as it's approved by you, I'll put it wherever you want it to go.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I thought that's how it works. I don't know anything about this MOU as a commissioner.
Right.
As a voting member.
That's true.
It may have come before and I just didn't see it, but I thought that we, just make the decisions who.
So the thought would be that whenever that's done, it would come before you for approval for what the final fate of that is.
This is not you, but this is a problem that I have with people, let's say the mayor or some other folks. Is that they make the decision who it's going to be and then they put it in front of us as a vote. So we want to discuss together who it could be, who it should be, and we're not afforded that. That's not you. I just want to say that for, the record. And
that MOU is being negotiated privately, correct?
That's right. It
This
is
is
not
not
part
us.
of the development agreement. And specifically, the development agreement says that it would be relocated to one of 2 county sites or another location approved by the mayor and commission. And so if it's the will of the body that it not be placed in a site where Historic Athens could occupy it, then I would assume your MOU is null at that point.
Yeah.
We have.
Make it clear, that's actually being negotiated privately, this is not staff or elected official. That's actually a private conversation going on between the developer and the Historic Athens.
And similarly, the scholarships and the dollar lease are kind of a private.
So with the purchase or the swap, you then own the White House, is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct.
So that's why it's private.
Right.
Okay, and so that's your decision, your choice.
Right.
Okay, that's good. I'm
And-
fine. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, it's a 200-year-old building. It's not protected by any historic statute, other than there is something that says Melissa Link can stop us from 90 days for demolishing it. But it was expressed to us that that's an important building. After looking into the history, it's like, wow, that's 200 years old. So we do want to do something with it. And we thought Historic Athens would be a good steward to it.
Sure, yeah, I agree. I do think they do good work.
Yeah.
And along those lines, did you give any consideration to going after a historic designation for Lake Park. The gym, the deacon at my church, the gym is named after him. He spent decades working there and building that program and that center of. And others would say that that's equally as historic to a lot of people, black, brown, yellow, and blue.
And of course, Commissioner, as a public facility, that would be incumbent on us to collectively decide to designate as an historic resource. And if it's the will of the body, certainly I'd be glad for that to be on the agenda.
Yeah, and we actually have started looking into that because it has come up.
I guess I got a bit lost there because I thought.
Commissioner, I'll recognize you in just a minute. I just want to make
Okay.
sure
I
that
got one-
Commissioner Johnson gets everything.
I may be finished, so we can see. Okay, so one of the first comments you made was that we did a public presentation in March 2024. So, I found some information about ADDA and some of their meeting minutes, not where everyone else holds their minutes, but I did find them. And so I see that you attended the February meeting and also the March meeting. And there was an executive session. It wasn't public and they don't film their video. They don't film their meetings. So we don't know what's happening. We don't have to hear everything, but there are people who have knowledge about this project. So the comment, we did a public presentation starting in March 2024. It was, we learned about it. And I'm sure you probably curious why we were so surprised because we learned about it in October. So it was, we don't have to see the entire conversation, but to know that there was a conversation about this massive project that has many benefits. So I just wanted to say that there are people in my district that's 50-50. I'm going to just tell you that people are looking at the finances of it, the benefits of it. And as they dig deeper, they're saying, well, what are we trading off? And I'm asking you questions. Some I know the answer to, most I don't. But just for the record, I think they're that's all I have.
Well, I have to apologize if that came off as exclusionary, but this is a complicated project and I feel like the way we try to attack these things is find your friends first. Start with Melissa Link, start with the ADDA. If they're not on your side, nobody's gonna be on your side, right? So I have to win them over one at a time. And so there was no disrespect or exclusion meant by those early meetings where I was really just trying to get team input on what we're even going to propose more broadly.
Right. That makes sense. And there's one quick thing. Also, this is the last one. So the very first one that came before us in June, May 30th, it was delayed until the very next meeting. And so that was June 10th. I have my dates.
That was approval.
So I'm looking at the minutes month by month by month from the ADDA site that they have here. And so there wasn't a motion by the body, the ADDA, until June 17th, which was afterwards. That usually it's before, and then they bring it to us.
The motion by ADDA was to also authorize the intergovernmental agreement terms. The request for ADDA actually came on May 9th. ADDA sent a letter requesting that we modify the 2020 intergovernmental agreement for these two lots.
So I get that, but I'm talking about after that.
Yeah, so
It said basically the 2020 was null and void because it's been too long.
I'm not going to speak to their interpretation of 2020. We had a standing IGA from 2020 with ADDA and no other partners. And when this body authorized the new IGA, one of the first things it did was say 2020 IGA is being replaced by this.
Yes, that's
Right,
correct.
right.
I'm not gonna look for it now, it's not important, but I wanted to point out that the consideration to vote and approve the IGA was after it came to us.
Well, I'm actually looking, and please, ADDA, correct me if I'm wrong. The agenda report speaks to on March 12th, that was when they voted to request a modification of the 2020 IGA. They then relayed that to us on May 9th. And then the commission took it up under June 3rd and eventually voted to approve it on June 10th under a special called session.
Okay, so in January, so that's March, right?
March 12th is when they recorded the vote.
So there is,
Commissioner, if we'd like to kind of lay out a sequence of the actions, we certainly could do that, but I want to make sure I get to all the substantive questions. I've got Commissioner Thornton waiting, so I'm going to turn.
I just
her
wanted
and
to say
Commissioner
that, I wanted to just end with my overarching is like the order isn't the correct order. And I'll find it and then come back later. Thank you.
Commissioner Thornton.
Well, I do want to add on to, one thing that Commissioner Johnson said. I've met with Attorney Gray. But we are planning to, submit a, historic designation for, Family Park. That is in the works and it is happening. I'll go one step further. We would like to look at those townhouses being considered a historic district, if they're interested, but we're not doing them together. Because it's much easier to go for the lay. But if we can create a historic district, we will be saving the homes of those folks that have been there for decades in those townhomes. But it's just a big thing. So I thought everybody knew that, but I guess I better repeat it publicly.
And obviously Lay Park being something we own.
That's right.
We've got some autonomy there.
Yeah, so that's happening, and that's not on the developer. So then I'm going to be the one that points at the elephant in the room about adding or the addition of African-American beneficiaries. Blacks. Beneficiary. I was trying to say beneficiaries.
I thought you were trying to say black.
But first of all, I think that if we would have had an open meeting from the beginning at some point, I know why we do not discuss acquisition of properties and stuff at the very beginning. I know there's a bunch of stuff that needs to happen behind closed doors. But I do think that if I had been part of that conversation originally, I would have definitely recommended what I see that is being proposed with the Black Chamber. I think someone said that, three people. Oh, they're just trying to get your black vote. You know what? My black vote only is as good as it is. And if it helps somebody else, I'm not saying I'm changing my vote. I'm just saying it's not about that. It's about how we help folk that need the help. This community has not been real nice to Black people.
The mansion's there with that Park Senior Independent Living.
Senior. But I do think that proposal, if it's able to be incorporated, it will send a message to other developers that if you're coming into our communities, you need to be putting something back into our community. So I don't know how I feel about it right now, but I do think it was innovative. I think it should have been a community government conversation. I think it wouldn't look like you're just doing stuff just to get the Black vote, because that's not. White folk owe us, point blank. You know, it's not like you're giving us something that we don't deserve. We don't deserve to not be connected or involved. So saying that I would like some more detail, and you probably can't give, I'm going to go to the session tomorrow, I think. You probably can't give me the details that I'm going to be looking for. I also think that if we had been part of this conversation at the beginning, with you dedicating that space, it would have been an awesome space for the Town Museum. So there was some opportunities that have been captured, but I think there was a bigger opportunity. I've never worked with a developer, even though Carol, Commissioner Myers brought up how much money y'all making, which is a good thing, but this may set a precedent where folk know if they come to Athens, they got to deal with the African-American community. They just can't wish us out here. So I don't have no commitments right now. I just wish that we could have been a part. And Judd, my question to you, because it says the Northeast Black Chamber of Commerce and the blacks, whatever, is that going to be a legal issue for us to have to deal with?
The agreement's not going to be with us. It's going to be between the Black Chamber and the developer. And as you heard him say, it's subject to the building permit issues, then the developer will be required contractually to honor their commitment.
So I want to add also, and I'm asking because it's between the developer and the chamber.
It'll be a contractual agreement, and like he said, if the building permit issues, they'll be contractually obligated to honor the agreement.
And I guess my point is, I guess I need to ask.
Chamber, yeah, sure. Yes.
Are you going to be seeking legal advice for?
We have legal counsel already.
On developing an agreement?
Yeah. Yeah. That's counsel.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Link.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Thanks this is a lot of information, but I think it's pretty comprehensive. I jotted down questions along the way and most of them got answered further on the presentation. I do think there's some legitimate concern about the ADA access to Lake Park. But right now, maybe staff can answer this. I know we have leisure services staff here. What does ADA access to Lake Park look like? Because in my experience, it's not that easy. Alex.
Sure.
Can you have that right now?
Yeah, I can. So there's some pre-existing ADA parking spaces that are right there at the top of the berm. We have honored those spaces since they were put in there many, many years ago. We also honored that there are two spaces that are past that leaf gate right there, that yellow leaf gate. There's two spaces up there as well that are marked as ADA.
So that's like right up against the building up that driveway.
It is.
And that's not going to change.
The flow there is going to be, there's going to be some grade changes on Hoyt Street. So we'll have to see exactly. I'm not the engineer, this guy is, so.
But those spaces adjacent to the building will continue to exist.
It's hard to say. Again, I don't know the geometry of everything that's going to happen right there. So, but again, like Andy was saying, the length is going to be longer.
Yeah.
The bridge from the parking garage was something that staff requested a while ago. And putting the ADA spaces in bulk around where that landing is, it's going to be the best option as presented to the department.
I mean, I've gotten some experience with ADA access because I ride a scooter, and partially that is because I do have mobility issues with stairs, with vertigo and stairs. And it's not that easy to get into the park right now from that parking lot out front and the steep stairs. So I do foresee that, that direct access through the flyover bridge on a level field could be beneficial, and looking at it on the map, the distance is not significantly longer than, I mean, it's actually shorter, I believe, than if you would be parking behind Linden House and behind the facility.
I'll note as a user of the facility, those spaces that are just across from the baseball field, cut in just behind Lay Park are probably the most accessible on a level grade now versus those that are at the corner of Hoyt and Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I mean, access isn't all that accessible right now. So, you know, I do foresee access to that being easier for someone who might use a mobility device or have a stroller or something like that. Thanks for the bring of the potential by right development. You know, what we could see here is effectively a 10-story tower in out the Foundry building and a story tower built right there that does not have any of that public interface and publicly accessible spaces and the public right of way through the structure. And, you know, potentially wouldn't have the affordable housing contribution that we see in this. I mean, that's what really gets me. You know, our downtown development standards are very, very loose. You know, a 200 bedroom per acre can go up 10 stories effectively. And here we have an opportunity to go into a public-private partnership, which, I mean, both ABDA would be going into the public-private partnership, which we talk about from time to time. Why aren't we doing more public partnerships? Here is the opportunity to do that. And not only that, but we're getting some public infrastructure out of it that will enable further affordable housing development, continued construction at NODA, and that $7.8 million that could help build those bedrooms or contribute to other affordable housing needs, whether it's, you know, fixing up people's homes, eviction prevention, all the things that we can do through our affordable housing fund. You know, nobody's a fan of these big, tall student housing buildings. I'm definitely not a fan of them, but the reality is we are a university town and a growing university that is not keeping us with building student housing on campus. For whatever reasons, UGA does not want to commit to, you know, massive student housing on campus. They built 500 bedrooms recently. I think they've committed to 500 more. That's a drop in the bucket. Our in-town neighborhoods are taking the brunt of those students, and the parking is even worse there. There's no opportunity to build parking decks in the middle of Hancock and East Athens and Normaltown. You know, here we have an opportunity to accommodate them, hopefully suck some of them out of those neighborhoods. And, you know, when I came here as a graduate student in 1993, I was an art history graduate. I wanted to use my interest and get involved in the community, and I landed at the Linden House. And Nancy Lukashevitz took me under her wing. And, you know, I was there, you know, cutting and pasting with some of those little kids from Bethel Homes and East Athens, and hanging art shows. You know, I saw how these public facilities benefit the community, and I was a student. I would love to see more students participate in those activities. You know, we worry about the students taking over these facilities, but I'd really love to see students contribute more to this community. And maybe that's a deeper conversation we need to have with the university. They do have a service learning program, but it's you know, it's very optional and minimal. And, you know, maybe that the more students who we have coming to our community and utilizing our community facilities, hopefully we can draw on those talents and kind of integrate our community more and get the benefits of those students, and the kids that grow up here can have can aspire to go to college and become part of this community as college students and professionals and pass that on to the next generation. You know, that could be a fantasy in some part, but, you know, we really need to break that town-gown divide, because right now, plenty of our communities are really being overwhelmed, and we really need to work together more and figure out how UGA can better benefit this community, whether it's monetarily or through the contributions of those students.
Thanks, everyone. Mr. Taylor?
So does the developer have to pay for the sewer if they built by rights? No.
The MOU for the sewer states that one of the conditions for it to be applicable is the approval of a development agreement.
Susan? She gone. That was her question. My question and a statement. So if the core group hadn't have come in, who would have finished NODA? And how long do you think that would take us? Like if the core group.
3, 4, and 5.
Right, yeah, so, yeah.
Yeah, so we have an IGA with the Housing Authority for North Downtown Athens, and they have a partnership with Jonathan Rose and Columbia Brookside that extends through the first 4 phases. Phase 5 has always been a bit of a next step or further discussion because it involves more existing housing authority inventory, if you will. So if none of this had materialized, we would continue with both of the proposed sewer upgrades. We will continue with our partnership with the Housing Authority, which includes kind of a path forward on TSPLOST and figuring out how to keep the financials work for a phase 3. And so I think the simplest way to describe it is this project creates an opportunity to make those discussions easier. But if this project didn't exist, we would not walk away from those discussions.
So we would have just been looking for different ways to be able to make sure it's.
That's right.
Paying for my company. The next time, you want to do something for the Blacks, maybe just go to the Black neighborhood and ask those Blacks what they would like, because those are the Blacks that's going to be affected by this power. They're going to be affected so much so, not just to simply say, well, we're going to finish building you somewhere else to stay, because a lot of them aren't going to just sit around and live in the conditions that they're currently living in the Old Bethel to see 3, 4, and 5 be completed. Yeah, I was gonna go deeper, but I think for time's sake, thank you for your presentation.
Any, let me ask before we close.
Yeah, I need to correct one of my colleagues on the housing that UJ actually, they're building a 2,000 bed going right now. So and I just met actually last 2 weeks, to your point, with a group of students, mainly African-American students. They want to find out how they can get more involved. And I said, hey, this is, don't come and spend your 4 years here in the shell and not get out in the community. So their pledge is to start doing more. I think more and more students are trying to do that. But again, we need to be welcoming at the same time. And then, we say, we want to work with UJ, but then we throw shade at them. So I think it has to be a two-way street. You're right. I would love to see them do more. But also just keep in mind, they add 681 million to the tax base in this community. So just want to be mindful of that. But I think there's a lot of things to be said, and this was great. I think this was learned. That's why I really want to push for this work session. Put all these things on the table. Everybody understand what's going on. Everybody hearing the same thing at the same time. There's still questions. And again, Andy, thank you and thank you all for wanting to do things in our community and want to really put back into our community. And I don't think any commissioner sitting around this table right now don't appreciate that. I think, and when you and I talk, I said to me, I'm always gonna put our young people and our kids first when it comes to things that's gonna impact. And I think sometimes people don't think about that. We look at dollars, look at all these things, but what's gonna happen to those kids 5, 10 years down the road when that community center may not be welcoming to them. So that's all I'm saying. So thank you for what you want to provide for us. And to my colleague's point, other developers come to town now, say, hey, they got a the Northeast Black Business Chamber that's willing to work with them to bring folks to the table that want to do work, want to do these construction trades. that's great. And I'm glad maybe we have set some precedents here. And that's good. But again, I'm never gonna, the children that's here, 30-some years I've been here, they need to make sure that they belong too.
I'll close out. So that makes no more comments, y'all. I do want to thank, Commissioner Fisher for insisting on this, open forum. Walking through that little room and looking at those pictures meant nothing to many of us. It looked like we were trying to buy a used car. I also want to appreciate that folk were able to give public comments. We usually don't do that on work sessions. So I see a lot of precedences, happen today. But again, I think that Commissioner Fisher wasn't so adamant about having this dialogue open. I'm not gonna say nobody's mind was changed, and I can't say you showed us anything different than it was on them little pieces of pictures going, it might be off, but just the setting and having this type, and people feeling like they could speak was very good for me.
Great. Thanks, Commissioner, and appreciate everybody's contributions, questions, insights and observations. Appreciate Andrew Saunders. You could imagine the number of hours that Andrew has spent working on this development agreement and kind of understanding the component pieces, including some very deep in history. You'd be astounded, and I think he presented a great breadth of knowledge here today. Almost 20 years working in this room. I've worked with any number of development partners. I'll share that Andy Savoy and his team have been among the very best and really most engaging and willing to have conversation. And you don't find that every day. And the component pieces continue to state, I think, add up to a great benefit to the community, whether it's the Arch Walk pieces, the pieces that you all have really pre-approved in the past, such as the inclusionary zoning code, kind of all mean, I believe that this will be of great benefit to the community. So thank you and your team and everybody here. All right. Hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon, and we will see you on the 16th for agenda 7. Thank you.